Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Dorset Police and Crime Panel meeting. Today, we will be looking at the Police and Crime Commissioner's Q4 report and also doing a deep dive on drugs, alcohol and gambling. Before I start the meeting, what I would like to do is to congratulate the Police and Crime Commissioner, Mr. David Sidgwick, on being re-elected. Congratulations, and congratulations from all. Is that me? Is that better? Yeah, cool. Just reiterate, Dorset Police and Crime Panel, Q4 meeting. Going back to what I was saying, may I congratulate you, David, on your being re-elected. Well done. May I also welcome new Police and Crime Panel members based on the election, the local council elections, Councillors Bowen, Gibson, O'Leary, Starr and Wood. And may I also thank outgoing Police and Crime Panel members, Les Fry, Sherry Jesperson, Graham Carr-Jones, Peter Barrow and Pauline Batstone. May I also take this opportunity of thanking Elaine, who was our clerk for a number of years and has now moved on to pastures new. I think for myself personally, I'd like to congratulate all of you that stood for election and put yourselves up to the ballot box and its vagaries. So congratulations to all of you, and we will now move on to apologies. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So we have apologies from Councillor Flagg, Councillor Starr and Dr Mitten.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item 2, I trust you've all read the minutes. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make on the minutes? No, thank you. Moving on. Oh, yes, do apologise, I have forgotten. Introductions. It's written here, around the room for invite, and I missed it. My name is Mike Short. I'm the chair. To my left.
So I'm Mark Eyre. I'm the lead officer for the Dorset Police and Crime Panel.
Thanks, Mark. And starting at the front with Patrick, if you could just work your way back up, introducing yourselves to the Police and Crime Commissioner and the public.
I'm Patrick Canavan. I'm a councillor in BCP.
Peter Sidaway. I'm also a councillor of BCP representing Broadstone.
Alistair Keddy, BCP councillor for Queen's Park and Charminster.
Oh, right. I'll get the right button eventually. It's Tony Trent, BCP councillor representing Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Carl Wood, Dorset Council.
Councillor Louise Bown, also Dorset Council.
Councillor Simon Gibson, Dorset Council.
Councillor Louis O'Leary, Dorset Council.
For that, and moving on to the Police and Crime Commissioners team.
Morning, members. I'm Simon Bullock, the Chief Executive for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good morning. I'm Adam Harold, the Director of Operations for the Police and Crime Commissioner.
I'm David Sidgwick. Good morning. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset.
Thank you very much for that, and thanks again, Mark, for the kick. Thanks, Mark. Item 3, declarations of interest.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So this is just the opportunity for panel members to make any declarations that are necessary to ensure compliance with the Code of Conduct. So if I just pause briefly to make sure there aren't any. Okay, thank you, Chair.
And then moving on swiftly to item 4, public participation.
Thank you, Chair. So we have had a question from the Partnership of Violence Against Women and Girls organisations, and I'll just read that question out. So a group of organisations who represent equality and safety for women and girls sent an open letter to the Chair of the Police and Crime Panel, the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Chief Constable and the two chief executive officers of both Dorset and BCP councils about prioritisation of action to reduce violence against women and girls following the recent wave of violent crime in Dorset, including the tragic murder of Amy Gray. The group believe the increase of violent crime in recent months and the publicly reported rapes, the murder of Amy Gray and knife threat to a woman warrants an emergency meeting of the Police and Crime Panel. The organisations are seeking a response. And if at that moment, perhaps if we could open that question up to the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to address this right at the outset. On June the 10th, this open letter was sent to the recipients mentioned on behalf of Sir Optimist International Bournemouth, BCP Unity Promise, One Voice My Choice CIC, Foxtrot Campaign, Dorset Women CIC, Acts Fast and Safe Space Consultancy, a variety of groups providing service and advocacy for women and girls and calling for, in their words, the immediate prioritisation of the safety of women and girls in Dorset. A substantive joint response to the letter has been sent back, which sets out that as a partnership, we are all committed to working and investing across the county of Dorset to maintain community safety and proactively prevent crime and disorder. This delivery takes place through dedicated community safety partnerships, a multi-agency safeguarding hub, and both adult and child safeguarding boards, for example, which enable a clear joint focus on the importance of ensuring the safety of our communities, and in particular, the priority of women and girls, which remains paramount. As members will be aware, it's important to say that no one agency should or does work in isolation in achieving this goal. That said, we recognise that there is significant work to be undertaken to raise public confidence in relation to the joint work underway and to our joint response to the open letter. I don't intend to get into the detail of what that collaborated delivery looks like. Safe to say that the letter lists over a dozen strategies, plans, programmes and initiatives that are being jointly delivered across the county, and that you have been copied into our response, which I believe has been shared with the members. I'm also very aware that members have considered papers on violence against women and girls previously, and indeed have regular updates on the work undertaken in this area by my office as part of the quarterly monitoring report. And so, if I may, I will cover more of that detail later in the agenda. Safe to say for now that last week I had the honour of delivering the opening address at an OPCC organised conference dedicated to tackling violence against women and girls. Organised by my office, the event for education professionals included teachers, childcare staff and those in the sector, and was focused on keeping our children and young people safe, with a particular emphasis on early years children aged 0 to 11 years. In my role scrutinising the work of Dorset Police, I have set up a VAUG scrutiny panel, which reviews the handling of public contact relating to VAUG cases such as rape, stalking and domestic abuse, to ensure these reports are being handled appropriately. I've also commissioned victim services, including victim support, the Dorset Sexual Assault Referral Centre, SARC, and STARS Dorset, to ensure high-quality care for all victims of these distressing crimes. I've also allocated Safer Streets funding to provide further support for initiatives to tackle VAUG across Dorset, building upon the work already being carried out by partners. I also, when we see initiatives being suggested to us by partners, have supported them. One such, for example, would be Fresh Thoughts, which is a domestic abuse booklet produced by Pulsar Optimists. Finally, before I come back to the letter, members may be aware that VAUG has been added to the National Strategic Policing Requirement, recognising it as a national threat alongside terrorism, serious and organised crime and child sexual abuse. Yesterday, the National Police Chiefs Council published a statement on VAUG which sets out its assessment of the issue, what policing has done to date to tackle it, and what its intentions are for the future. I welcome this approach. A national whole system approach is entirely welcome, particularly as I've always believed this issue goes much further than simply robust enforcement from the police. A consistent, well-defined and managed partnership strategy will ensure early intervention and better opportunities for safeguarding, efficient communication, and importantly, vital progress in fighting these despicable crimes. In relation to the open letter then, I will just cover off the request made for the, and I quote, urgent convening of a meeting of the Police and Crime Panel to assure the public that there is purposeful accountability of associated strategies. Of course, members will know that the role of the Police and Crime Panel is to scrutinise the actions of myself and my team only, and it has no remit to scrutinise other strategies, including those produced by Dorset Police, BCP Council or Dorset Council. As a meeting of the Police and Crime Panel would not be able to accomplish the outcome being sought in the letter, this remedy has not been pursued. Chair, you may wish to comment on that, but I know that you have actually sent a letter yourself back to the people involved. In closing, I would want the public across Dorset to be very clear that those agencies charged with community safety and crime reduction work in strong, clear alignment with each other, and also with the wider community and voluntary sector. And we all share an absolute resolution to tackling these abusive, destructive offences. I will continue to work with any group that wants to make Dorset a safer place for women and girls. Their safety is and will continue to be a key priority for all partners across our county, and I'm fully committed to delivering on this for the people of Dorset. We all, whether individuals or organisations, need to be part of the solution, and I'm keen to continue working in partnership with everybody so Dorset becomes the safest county. Thank you.
Just to add to the Commissioner's response, from a panel member perspective, that joint letter hasn't actually been sent out to you yet, but we will forward that post this meeting. And just to clarify again that, as the Commission did mention, we did write out from the Chair's perspective yesterday in response to the letter clarifying the role of the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And it goes without saying that this panel firmly supports all the work that you're doing in this area, Commissioner. And we will cover VORG in our forward work plan within probably the next year, but that's up to the new panel. So moving on then, item 5, PCC annual report and police and crime plan update. Commissioner.
Chair, I'm not going to say a lot in this area. The annual report is a summary of my activity over the past year. It's previously been shared with panel members. I thank you for your suggestions, which were received by my office last month. Several changes have subsequently been made to the document as a result of those helpful suggestions. The finished document is included as an appendix and has also been used to inform the review of the police and crime plan. In terms of the police and crime plan, when I was first elected, I made it very clear that I intended the plan to span 2 terms of office. Bearing in mind the extent of my ambition and the fact that my first term was unusually shortened because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This then is a mild refresh of my plan. The changes are summarised on page 12 of your pack and relate to, number 1, an update of commitments bearing in mind delivery achieved to date. Number 2, an update of terms used where these have changed. And finally, new commitments made since the original publication of the plan. In the coming days, my team will be widely consulting on this refreshed plan, including with the Chief Constable, partners, and with yourselves as the Police and Crime Panel. If members have not received a draft for your attention and consideration, then we'll let you have one imminently, but I think you have it. Thank you. My intention is that a final copy of the revised 2021 to 29 Police and Crime Plan will be published by September 2024, and I look forward to receiving members' feedback on the proposed changes in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And yeah, panel members, you do have that, the new plan. You'll see the date that Mark put in the email out to you. If you could kindly get your comments back to him, I will then coordinate a response back to the PCC on the PCP's views on his changes to his police and crime plan. Anybody have any questions on that? Nope. Moving swiftly on then to the bulk or one of the meats of this meeting is item 6, quarterly monitoring report. Before we actually go into the quarterly monitoring report, which is the purpose of it is to receive an update on progress against the police and crime plan. There are a couple of what we would call in-quarter strategic questions that we would like to put to the PCC. And the first one of these is at the last meeting, the PCC was misquoted in the press when he called for everyone to intervene when they see antisocial behaviour taking place. Can the PCC please explain, elaborate on what he means or what he meant? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was interested about this because I talked about diversion and early intervention in order to tackle ASB. That is not the same as intervening, and I think it got confused with what I said later, which is talking about parental responsibility, school responsibility, and also a general civilian responsibility. And I do fundamentally believe that there is something about a sense of community spirit, about public spiritness. And that may be, at one end of the scale, volunteering to help with young people. It could be that you see something, and we encourage people to actually report. It could be that, that people would feel comfortable saying something if they saw something occurring. What it did not mean was physical intervention. And I think that's where possibly it got convoluted. There are times, however, where in certain circumstances, people should intervene. I'll give you one example and then I'll move on. The Pineapple Project talks about bystander training. So the Pineapple Project trains community guardians to challenge, observe and protect our young women where needed, including offering a safe haven, challenging inappropriate behaviour, signposting young women to appropriate services, providing a distraction or diversion and reporting safeguarding concerns or a crime. So some people will be comfortable doing that, some people will not, and they offer training so you can become a community guardian. So it is this general sense of community spirit and public spiritness that I am talking about so that we all try to make Dorset a safer place. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask following up on that? No? Moving on to the next question then. The National Black Police Association has withdrawn its support for the Police Race Action Plan, which sets out changes across policing to improve outcomes for black people who work within or interact with policing. The NPBA also alleges that a number of chiefs have threatened to withdraw funding from the National Race Action Plan from next month, March, and that many are refusing to drive local action despite signing up to the plan. Can the PCC please confirm that Dorset will continue to provide funding to the action plan? And can the PCC please brief the panel on how he is benchmarking the Chief Constable's progress in order to ensure this plan is being implemented? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Dorset Police, alongside a number of other forces, has yet to confirm whether it will continue this funding. There's a meeting in September of the National Police Chiefs Council where this will be discussed. Regarding your second point, I am keenly interested in progress against the National Race Action Plan. I attend on occasions the Legitimacy Board, but also my Chief Executive and Director of Operations attend it on a quarterly basis, and that's where the delivery of activity against this plan is considered. Following the last meeting of the Legitimacy Board, a Police Race Action Plan working group has been established to ensure tactical advice from communities is listened to and acted upon by Dorset Police. The Chief Executive and Director of Operations also attend this meeting and are actively involved in tracking progress against the plan. Last week, Dorset Police also hosted a visit of the National Police Race Action Plan Director and his team, which was attended by the Director of Operations, who updated the team on the OPCC's work to support public scrutiny of police powers and standards. The National Police Race Action Plan are working on a new outcome framework, which they expect to be issued alongside the autumn iteration of the plan. This will further assist local benchmarking to be undertaken. So I'm satisfied that we have a constant rhythm around looking at how this plan is put into practice. I will know more after the National Police Chief Council meeting in September.
Thank you for that. So can I just confirm that you are benchmarking the Chief Constable's progress?
Yes.
Moving on then to the actual Q4 report, starting with priority 1.
Sorry. Thank you very much indeed. What I'm going to do is move through the quarterly report. After each priority, I'll pause and deal with any questions. So the first priority is to cut crime and antisocial behaviour. If I look at the metrics first, I'm not going to dwell on it because we have no reds. They're moving in the right direction. I'm pleased again, for example, that antisocial behaviour has dropped. I know the importance of that to the people of Dorset. So let's look at some of the themes, some of the things that occurred during this quarter. One of the things which had been expressed to me, certainly by a lot of our villages in the rural community, was the issue of road safety and particularly speeding. And with this in mind, I look to launch a new initiative, a pilot of auto speed watch cameras. So we purchased 12 cameras. Those were positioned in areas with high levels of speeding complaints. And these complement the work of the Community Speed Watch scheme. So for those who are new councillors, haven't heard me talk about Community Speed Watch before, it is one of the best community interventions that we have. Over 800 volunteers across Dorset in various speed watch groups who make a real difference to lowering the speed on our roads. But they can't be everywhere. And so the auto speed watch cameras will support them. And there may be some villages who are too small to actually recruit a speed watch group. Excuse me. With this in mind, therefore, this is a pilot, and we're working through at the moment issues with it and seeing how it works. The idea will be, following a successful pilot, we'll look to roll it out further across Dorset. You'll know that I'm very keen on reducing burglary in Dorset. During this quarter, the Safer Streets Fund gave us £15,000, which we're able to support vulnerable victims of burglary through the installation of safety measures, largely due to something called the Bobby van. We also started something. The key to burglary is prevention. And when do we think about our house? When do we think about the locks on our house? It's usually when we've taken up a new rental or if we've moved house. So what I've started is I've started an initiative with estate agents where one estate agent at the moment, and we're looking to roll it out to more of them, those estate agents are putting in their welcome packs prevention advice, which has been worked up with Dorset Police, so that you actually get all the advice. It's not just about the locks, it's also about what plant you could grow which would deter burglars from coming over your fence. It's all sorts of things like that. So I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward, and as this is a public forum, any estate agents who would like to participate in that scheme, please get in touch with my office. We'd like to roll it out with other estate agents across Dorset. We also, because we'd had very successful initiatives to reduce motorcycle theft, we did this again. This is where we give low-priced locks through Doc Bike to those motorcycle owners. It is largely useful for those motorcycles which are on the lower end of value, maybe have been purchased because that's the only way somebody can get to their job. And we're very good at purchasing motorcycles. We're less good at purchasing the locks in order to protect them. So this, again, would have given that initiative. And it's anecdotal, I know, but one of the motorcycle retailers said to me they had seen a reduction in a number of motorcycles coming back for repair, which had been stolen for joyriding, since this scheme has been in operation. So that's good news. As we've been talking about the issue of violence against women and girls, and also I'm passionate about supporting young people. I will just talk about one more thing, which is we secured money through the Safer Streets Fund, which was given to STARS Dorset, to recruit a consent engagement officer to provide guidance and education to young people in college and university. So I think I'm going to stop there, Chair, and take any questions that may occur to the panel.
Thanks, Commissioner. Looking at the priority leaves for that, come to you in a minute if you don't mind. Tony, Carl?
One of them, you mentioned Auto Speed Watch, and I don't know who would be responsible for providing them, but I came across quite a bit of that when I was in Cornwall last year. And one very effective measure, I think, is actually when you go through a controlled speed zone, on your way out of that zone, your registration number flashes up and it tells you the average speed you've been doing and a thank you if you've been keeping within the speed limit. And I wonder whether something like that could be provided by whoever is able to provide it as an add-on to speed watches through villages. It's particularly effective when you've got a single road through a village. And I'm sort of wondering whether that can be looked at. And I'll come back with my second question. It's easier to ask one at a time.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Can I just check a clarification for my understanding? You were talking, that was at the end of an average speed zone, am I correct? Okay, so average speed zones, I think we've only got one in Dorset. They are extremely expensive. They are about £250,000, is my understanding, to put an average speed zone in place. So that technology obviously works within the average speed zone. I'm not certain that we'd be able to have that technology linked to Auto Speed Watch. I'll ask the question, but I think that's probably part of the £250,000 worth of average speed technology there. But I will ask the question and see.
Thank you. It's just that I think it actually adds a little bit of, dare I say, humanity to things like that, because it, you know, not only threatens you if you happen to be driving too fast, but it actually acknowledges if you're driving safely. The other question is, the PCC recently stated that I expect Dorset Police to investigate every shoplifting report and to attend where a suspect has been detained or there has been an assault against staff. How is the PCC benchmarking the adherence by Dorset Police to this statement?
Thank you. So this is tracked quarterly through the Internal Police and Crime Plan dashboard, and exceptions are raised by the PCC to the Chief Constable. So if I hear that there's an issue, if a store contacts me about there's an issue with Dorset Police, they're not getting the service they require, then I will talk to the Chief Constable about it, as I have done. Acquisitive crime is also monitored via the Force Performance Board, attended by the Chief Executive, and the PCC is briefed on relevant campaigns and operational activity, such as the ongoing Operation Shopkeeper. So I chair something called the Safer Dorset Business Partnership. And what that does is it looks at reporting, it looks at the relationship between the police and retail crime. Because of that partnership, we now have a strategic plan, we have a tactical plan, and we have an operational plan which is delivered called Operation Shopkeeper, which is targeting the most prolific offences. And that Operation Shopkeeper actually has been so successful. It started in November. That's why in the local papers you start seeing shoplifters coming forward and getting significant sentences now. 16 months, 3 years, to quote 2 examples. Operation Shopkeeper is now business as usual. But there's something else as well. I expect the attendance where a shoplifter is detained by Dorset Police to be exemplary. It came to my attention from one retailer that they were only attending 20% of those calls when they had detained somebody. That was back last summer. I raised that. It is now 80%, and I'm hoping it improves further. The point I'd like to make is we're very much in a partnership here. We need the retailers to work with the police, and we are doing that with, for example, Bournemouth Bids, the business improvement districts as well. The retail chains, I have written to every single one of them to come to a specific meeting to discuss what more we can do. Because what I'd like to have is those sorts of numbers for every retail chain. If one maps what happens, I'd like to see their other mapping so that I can use that to talk to Dorset Police about it. So this is a work in progress. I'm not going to reiterate my feelings around shoplifters. I made that clear in the past. It is a national problem. We are not quite, we don't have quite such a large increase as the national. Nevertheless, we need to do more, and I'm determined we'll do it. Thank you for the question.
This is a follow-up to the auto speed watch question. I'm just curious regarding the 12 cameras. Will they be permanent or mobile placements? Are they potentially redeployable? And what would be the criteria for their placement? Thank you.
So it's the reason for the pilot is to examine exactly those sorts of questions. In my head, my ideal would be that they would be where they were, stay where they were, and we would have more cameras, so they would stay. But we need to work through the technology, make certain the technology works the way that we want it to. We need to make certain the administration works the way we want it to, and any unlooked for consequences of these. That's why it's a pilot. So I monitor it through Dorset Road Safe, which I sit on, and we'll see where we go going forward.
Louis.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Commissioner, how do you see a change in administration, both locally and nationally, affecting your current policies and your job role, and especially in regards to funding?
Thank you. I'm very clear. I've been elected for the next 4 years to serve the people of Dorset. In the last few months, you've been elected to serve the people of Dorset, and the new MPs have been elected to serve the people of Dorset. I'm very clear that I leave my badge at the door when I take this job. I take an oath, basically, to work for everybody. I'm assuming everybody else also wants the very best for the people of Dorset. I have reached out to the MPs. I've reached out to ask them to come to a regular bi-monthly meeting, which is what I had in place before. I will talk about money a little bit later on. I hope that they will align together, because there would be a huge amount of power in a collective across parties, all saying the same thing for an area. So I am hoping that we can genuinely all work together in order to make Dorset the safest county. That's got to be the goal. So we'll see. It will be down to each individual and how they want to play. But I'm very prepared to play because it's about the people of Dorset. Thank you.
On that theme, the Bournemouth West MP, I was in the media recently. I won't read the whole statement out, but it starts, antisocial behaviour is a huge issue in Bournemouth town centre. What sort of comments have you got on that, Commissioner?
Thank you for the question. I would very much have appreciated to have a relationship in place with the MP for Bournemouth West, but we haven't managed to achieve that yet because I'm waiting to hear back to my initial letter. I was briefed on this incident, and whilst I cannot divulge operational details, I will say that the position is more complex than has been reported. I'm optimistic that Dorset Police will provide a more complete statement in the future. But let's be clear. There has been, for literally years, a decline in the centre of Bournemouth. And the 7-year police and crime plan did two things which were absolutely necessary. It clearly related the needs of the people. More importantly, it changed the culture of Dorset Police. Having changed that culture, having got more officers, they are now able to mount operations they could not do before. A year ago, there were 2 operations occurring in the centre of Bournemouth. There are now 10 on various different things. So, there's the Bournemouth Town Team, which is a joint initiative between Dorset Police, BCP Council, and their partners to help deal with and prevent crime in ASB. This includes an established team of 2 sergeants and 12 PCs, which is also being expanded by a further 6 over the summer months to make certain there's 2 officers for each section, including the central area and the beaches. Indeed, in the incident in question, the complainant was able to make a report directly to officers who were on foot patrol in the area. On top of this, one of the operations I spoke about, Operation Seaside, is also running this summer to bolster visible foot patrols along the beaches, as officers from across BCP Neighbourhood Policing Team will work closely with the seafront staff and CSAF officers on beach safety and enforcement of the Public Space Protection Order to reduce antisocial behaviour. We were given significant funding for hotspot policing, so Operation Track will ensure an enhanced visible uniformed presence in ASB and our most serious violence hotspots at relevant times, so additional patrolling. For June, under Op Track, 90 hours of double-crewed foot patrolling was carried out across Bournemouth hotspots. It led to 5 arrests, 4 stop and searches, 1 vulnerable female safeguarded, and 26 antisocial behaviour incidents managed at scene. We also have recently, indeed in the last couple of weeks, I've been down to help launch the Clear Hold Build scheme, which is running in Bournemouth. This is known as Bournemouth Together, and it's a 3-phase approach focused on, number 1, clearing serious organised crime from the area, holding then and stabilising the area to ensure that safe spaces remain and other criminals do not move in. And the third one is about building community resilience, improving trust and confidence in the police, and making the location a safer place to live and work. Since March 2024, 49 people have been arrested and illegal drugs, vapes and tobacco products valued at over £200,000 have been seized. 14 adults and 5 children have also been safeguarded. We also have Operation Fireglow and Nightjar, which is about the nighttime economy, and they continue. This means there's a minimum of 20 officers on foot patrol every Friday and Saturday night. And aside from these specific Bournemouth operations, we also have the benefit of other wider operations, which I talk to under the different themes. So there's a lot of work going on. I'd be delighted to brief the individual MPs on what's going on in the area, what's happening, the police and crime plan, in order to make certain we all have a common understanding of what's going on.
Thank you very much for that. Pushing on. Fell at the first fence, didn't I? Alistair.
Thank you. I will make this brief. Commissioner, you touched on OpTrack and the visible daily patrols that are happening across Dorset. I've had a lot of positive feedback from my community. We have 2 OpTrack hotspots in North Bournemouth, for example. These really are these are targeting Winton High Street and Charminster Road, not to get too local about it. The feedback from the community has been immense. People are perceiving this as a return to Bobby's on the beat and visible policing. It's something that the public really, really want to see more of. Are there any plans to get extra funding for OpTrack, and are there any plans to expand the number of hotspots that are currently in action?
Thank you for the question. I am really pleased to hear that the public are actually seeing the visible patrolling and the police on the beat. That was the whole point. Regarding more, that is down to money. As I say, I've been as quick as I could out the box trying to contact the new MPs. We need to lobby together. We need to address the issues that we have around funding. I will talk a little bit about that later on. But the quicker we can do that, the quicker we can get that noise. I've got a letter which I will be putting in with the Chief Constable to the Policing Minister in the very near future on exactly that point. I've got a 7-year plan. We know it's working. I want to make certain it works. We need the money in order to do that.
Thank you. You mentioned the collaboration with the state agents, which I thought was a really good idea. I'm just wondering, first of all, do you have any idea how you would plan to measure the effectiveness of that relationship? And also, in the long term, how you envision that developing further? Or is that a long-term plan, or something you're just trying out for now? Thank you.
So it came from an individual who I was sitting down and talking to about the issue of burglary. We're trialing it. We've got one estate agent who's doing it. We can obviously measure how many packs are given out, but prevention is very difficult to measure. What we do know already is that when we look at dwelling burglary, we know that, I quoted it in my manifesto, it's down 24% in Dorset. If you look in the quarterly report, it's down, yes, it's down slightly again. So that's how we'll measure it. But we haven't done this, so hopefully by doing it, we'll get more reduction. Prevention is the hardest thing to measure because you're trying. It's a, you don't know which bit has had the effect. And one of the biggest challenges I have, which I've said in this forum before, is ensuring the police say all the good stuff they do. And The second challenge is to make certain that the press actually report the good stuff that they do. This was in the press. I'm hoping when other estate agents come on, we can make more noise. I think it's in the estate agent's interest, if they want to play, for them to actually say they're corporately responsible. They want not only the person to buy the house, but to have a lovely time living in the house, and this is part of how they can help with that. So I'm hoping all that comes together. But thank you, good question.
I'm now going to move on to priority 2, because I can't see any hands up, which is good news. Priority 2.
So priority 2 is about making the police more visible, connected and engaged. So this is basically about 3 main things. It's about the uplift and visibility of the police, and I'm really pleased. Thank you, Councillor Keddy, you've made my day with what you said earlier. It's the hardest thing for me to get feedback on, is the police being more visible. One of the things which I'd like to highlight here is where we're getting to with our investment in technology. So, hang on a minute, this isn't make every penny count, this is making policing more visible and connected. But fundamentally, the Pronto platform is about changing the way that the officers operate. When I was a candidate 4 years ago, I was out with on a 999 call in a van. We went to a call, 15 minutes, 10 minutes in the call where not a lot happened, 15 minutes back, then 15 minutes each officer writing up the call on a desktop computer. That's not efficient. Now, it's changed vastly since then. The Pronto platform is about having apps on their mobile phone which can do what they used to have to go back to the office to do. So there's an ongoing movement to put these apps on the Pronto system. And we've seen a large uptake in the use. The idea being is they're out and about and they can do their work wherever they are. It's also resulted in an improvement in the public protection notice accuracy, which was reported to the Forces Continuous Improvement Board. So this would be, PPN is, for example, they would find a child which needed safeguarding or something like that. So actually there's a second benefit from it. I've been very active from the point of view of talking about various issues. I release news articles and newsletters every week. I'm highlighting that because obviously councillors may wish to pick up on some of those newsletters. I know that they go out and have been found useful by residents. We're also looking at how my communications team can work with neighbourhood policing teams to develop improved community engagement scrutiny processes to ensure that the neighbourhood engagement commitments are met. Let me make one small point. I have an expectation that councillors are a key factor in the communication from Dorset Police to the public. I would expect you to get regular contact from an inspector or worst case scenario, a sergeant, in order to make certain that you are updated on your patches. If that isn't happening, then please let me know and I can raise it in my weeklies with the Chief Constable. I talk about something called customer service. Dangerous concept, I know, but I see the public as the police's customers in lots of different ways, including that of the contact system. So basically, during this quarter, there were notable improvements in 999 call handling. You may know that we've been on a journey with this. The summer before last, it was at 75% that we were answering 999 calls within 10 seconds. Last summer, it was 85%. We're now hitting regularly 90%, which is where we want to be. That is despite the ongoing issues we have around calls which aren't 999 calls. My McDonald's Deliveroo hasn't arrived. I am deliberately using what people might consider silly examples, but they do actually come in. And last year we had a particular issue with Samsung technology, which thank goodness was resolved by forces and PCCs working together. Samsung phones were dialing 999 and we had, I think it was 80 calls in 2 hours from somebody jogging on the Purbex. And of course, from the police end, they don't know if that call is real, even though it's not picked up. So all that has been worked through, and we've basically changed technology in order to get a better system. So not only are we now looking at faster responses, but we're getting more 999 calls answered in 10 seconds. And for reassurance, I've also scrutinized what the tail looks like. So that 10% outside the 10 seconds. And unsurprisingly, it's very close to 10 seconds. It's up that end. So that's good news. I think I'm going to stop there for now, because I'm certain there's going to be questions in that area.
Yeah, I've got a question here, if you wouldn't mind. Can the PCC provide an update on the outcome of measures taken to improve and simplify the call handling process and the communications used to explain to the public how to use the websites?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd be delighted to do so. As you know, this is a, briefly. So, hang on a minute. You asked me a really complicated, difficult question. You want it briefly. I'll do it as briefly as I can do it, Chair. Well, first of all, we know that 999 is rightly prioritised. Q4, 31,000 calls to 999. The force answered 92.1% of these calls within 10 seconds against a target of 90%. Non-emergency contacts. So that's what we're talking about with the 101 system. Such contact predominantly comes in two ways: the 101 non-emergency telephone number and the various reporting forms on the Force website. In Q4, these totaled 35,000 and 12,000 respectively. The non-emergency contact is triaged, in part to ensure misdirected emergency calls for service. So it's correctly prioritised and appropriately directed. The majority of non-emergency calls, so the majority of the 101 calls, are answered by the triage team in under 30 seconds. Of those that are then directed to the Force Control Centre call handlers, the average answer time was 15.7 minutes, a time that the Force is working to reduce. But it also represents an improvement compared to past years. I do remember, I think again, it was the summer before last, we were talking about a 28-minute average time. I wanted to provide this data because it's transparent, but it also shows the sheer volume and complexity. We need to bear in mind that what we should really be measuring is the time from the pick up the phone to when somebody gets a resolution, of which the call bit is part of it. We know at peak times, 101 call answer times do increase. It's not uncommon for members of the public to raise concerns about delays. In fact, the reason I'm sitting here is one of the things that got me grumpy was the 101 delay, which I had, which was 45 minutes. So I absolutely understand it. So there's extensive scrutiny on the way the Force handles this contact. In terms of improving and simplifying it, this is extensive and ongoing. This is ranging from changes to training, recording processes, to improvements in technology and software at the call handler's disposal. In the short term, it's hoped that the training and process improvements will pay dividends. The biggest gains won't be realised until we change the software systems, which is what we're looking at. Ooh. Interesting. Okay. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was the issue of communication around the contact system, which you alluded to. Ideally, what would be the best is if you are able to use the online system, please do it that way. That would free up the 101 telephone system for those who are unable to use the online system. But the force is great at problem solving. It's got all the plans to improve the 101 system. But there is the issue, thank you, there is the issue of actually communicating how to use it. And you alluded to that in your question. So, what I'd like to do is just briefly outline what I and my office have done in order to help with that. One of the biggest issues is a lot of the things people want to report isn't as a victim of crime. They've seen something else. It's a drug deal. Or in a rural area, somebody they've worried about scoping their farm. And so that sharing of intelligence is really important. And that's what's changed. The website changed, a new button was put on it, and then I have and will continue to do so through my office, through the contacts I have, the residents' meetings, ensure that the contact engagement leaflet outlining how to use this is out there. And every councillor has had that sent to them. I'll ask for the new ones to have it resent to them if they haven't had it before, so that we can extensively communicate how to use the system. Because I know that some residents actually contacted me and contacted yourselves and said it's taking too long, and part of that was they were reporting via the victim reporting piece. So there is a patchwork quilt of stuff going on. We know that in the Force Control Centre, there's more to be done, particularly around technology, because we have call handlers who have to do multiple tasks in order to fulfill one call. Some of that could be sped up with technology. We know that we've improved the website. We know that we've altered tiles on it to make it quicker for intelligence. But there's more to be done. And I will continue to hold the force to account for its public contact performance, as will my office. And we look at it intensively on force boards, which my chief exec and director of operations attend, but also through a board I chair, which is the use of powers and standards scrutiny panel. This is the work in progress. This is the Rome which needs to be built. And we've started and we're making changes, but there's still more work to be done. Thank you.
We can play a role, thank you, we can play a role in communicating out to our residents the success of some of the things you do, and also some of the initiatives that you have that, as you were just talking about, making sure they understand. I myself, I have 2 surgeries a month, and I issue a newsletter every week, and every time there's something interesting, I do put that in there and communicate to them. However, in the 15 months since I've been elected, our regular meeting with our MPT has gone from monthly to every 2 months, which is really not helpful. Quite often I hear about operations or initiatives in my village on Facebook when the local PCSO put something on Facebook to say, we've been into Broadstone, we caught some shoplifters. And that's the first I know about it. So I think those are things that we could improve on, and then we can be part of your communications team and get out to our residents. Because if I take my area, I'm very lucky. My area has an incredibly low crime rate, but there's also an incredibly high level of paranoia that crime is there. And the best way for me to get across to them is to use the Neighbourhood Watch, the newsletters that I issue and all of that to say, actually, it's not, and look, here is the evidence. But I don't have that. And I don't get the follow-up from the police either to say, when there has been issues, we did have an illegal immigrant issue where they went into a nail bar and they all ran out the back. We never got the information back to be able to go and reassure the public what had gone on. And I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you're in a low crime area. That's the first thing. But you are right. It is also the fear of crime. So the point about the bi-monthly to monthly, I raised that with the Chief Constable last week because I'd had it from other areas as well. And the way I expressed it was, look, you know, councillors are the conduit to the communities, exactly what you're saying, because I believe that too, which is why I've always said, if you're not in the service that you think you should get, come to me. Now look, it may be that an inspector can't come to your monthly meeting every time, but I'd expect that to be devolved down, if you see what I mean. So, you know, it should be, in my view, that engagement is embedded from the top of the force down to the bottom, and that we use every avenue that we've got to make certain that that happens with the public. Now, something I'm really interested in also is, are you all on Dorset Alert? Fine, that's great, because that's another conduit that the police use in order to communicate. Fine. In that case, regarding the bi-monthlies, I'm already on it. So thank you for that.
If I could just follow up slightly, I just wanted to say that our local MPT is, our inspector is brilliant. He wants to do it monthly. He has been told to change it to bi-monthly, which is the bit that felt slightly frustrating because him and his PCSOs are a fantastic team.
Hopefully, by talking to the Chief Constable, then the message is coming up and going down.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, as you know, the issues around reporting crime online are quite close to my heart. To give some context, I unfortunately live in a high crime area. The community over the years has gradually felt disempowered by its inability to effectively report crime in a timely manner. Going back to the situation that was described of 2 years ago where it could take 28 minutes just to get through on 101 to log an issue. Now, we have high levels of county lines activity, crack and heroin consumption, dealing, and the community had felt unable to use mechanisms to report this. This has the knock-on effect of the police service not having enough real data to identify hotspot areas. Now, I am heartened at the work that has gone on to improve this, and I am beginning to, I think the direction of travel is definitely correct. I agree that there is more work to be done. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, I really welcomed the addition of the report intelligence form. So rather than going through the still quite lengthy online 101 form, this allows communities who see suspicious behaviour, see a drug deal, see someone trying the handles of doors, vehicle doors on the road, to jump on, fill in a 2-minute form with concise information that goes straight to the call centre, gets logged and becomes part of the figures. When I started using this form, I actually got a follow-up call from the call centre at Winfrith when we started using this last year. What would really improve the report intelligence function is the ability to submit photos and media. I understand it's using the content management system, and adding a kind of media field to that would be relatively trivial, although there would be an overhead of storing lots of media. I have had direct feedback from my communities. I've been promoting the report intelligence function as far and wide as possible. I mean, not only does it work for immediacy of reporting for the communities, but it also takes the weight off 999 and 101 phone services. So we get a more distributed, even spread of the load. So the ability to submit media and photos via report intelligence would be fantastic. I understand we use an online platform called Single Online Home. The internal system is Single Online Home for general reporting. I believe we were sharing this implementation with other constabularies, and it's come up in prior panels that force communications are being brought in-house. Would you be able to give me I'm assuming that the use of Single Online Home and the internal bringing force comms back in-house are related. Would you be able to give a short overview of how that may improve service to the public?
Thank you. So the first thing about the video and uploading of images, I'm going to let my chief executive speak about that, because I know that there's a lot of work going on in that direction, but he's got the detail. So I'll let him do that first, and then I'll come back to you about Single Online Home and force comms, etc.
Yes, thank you. So we agree is the long and the short of that. There is always an IT issue. Why? So essentially, the force is looking at a solution called DEMS, which is Digital Evidence Management System. There's always a long police acronym for everything. But essentially, that's the digital backbone that sits within the force that controls all of that digital evidence information. You'll appreciate that when members of the public send through an image or a short video, that's a really easy thing for an individual to do on a mobile phone. It takes a matter of moments. But from a force perspective, that is gigabytes, terabytes of data that it's receiving on an ongoing basis that needs to be evidentially stored, controlled, mapped, geocoded, and actually the management and the manipulation of that data and the attaching it to a crime record or to a person record, as the case may be, is actually quite a complex process. So we have been looking at solutions to manage that process for us for quite some time. And I'm pleased to say that we, as a force, are going to be moving towards the award stage of a contract to deliver that service this year. So it's just going through a procurement phase at the moment. We are going through the Crown Commercial Government Cloud framework. So it's all in line. We are very hopeful to be able to make a decision moving towards September. When that comes in, and I don't want to give, I don't want to overstate it, but it will be a year's worth of implementation. It's quite a significant IT project, quite expensive as well. But that program will last a year of implementation, and then will be delivered for a number of years following that. But essentially, that will solve all of those problems. It will also give a couple of other additional benefits. One is that it will enable us to exchange information between our strategic alliance partner, Devon and Cornwall, really easily. And also, and this is the important bit as well, it will enable us to produce something called a digital case file, which means that we can submit that evidential information to the Crown Prosecution Service and to the HMCTS electronically. And it can all be attached in a bundle. Members will be familiar with a court bundle. All that digital information and evidence can then be attached to that court bundle and sent through electronically, which at the moment we're unable to do as a service collectively. So it is actually quite an exciting opportunity. It's something that we've been pushing for quite some time. You'll appreciate, though, some of the complexities I've talked about, but we very much are on the same page here, and and hopefully we'll be able to announce that towards the end of the year.
That's beyond my wildest dreams in terms of having a fully integrated digital management system. thank you for the update.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the in-depth response there. It's good to see that Alistair, it's beyond his wildest dreams. It's a bit scary, really.
I'm sorry, Chair, there was a second bit. I will be very brief, Alistair. The single online home, the website, that's used by 80% of the British population, 35 other forces. That's, I believe, the best solution that we have from the point of view of the website. Now, your point was about force comms, force communication. Yes, we are looking to bring that back to Dorset. I prefer to give you a more comprehensive answer at the next meeting, if I may. There are some sensitivities, so I'd like to do it then. Are you happy with that?
With that, I'd look forward to hearing that update. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put that down as an action for the next meeting. I've got two more questions, if you won't mind, chaps, if I could ask you to bin the preamble, just get straight to the question.
I'm not going to talk about communication because, Commissioner, you and I have spoken about that before, but I would echo Councillor Sidway's comments that it's quite frustrating that there is such a gap in that communication. I'll put it as politely as that. And I think we could do a lot better. But my question really relates to these statistics about response times. What would interest me is not necessarily the time between the person picking up the phone to make the call or, putting the issue online. The issue for me is when they eventually get hold of a human being, and that human being who works for the police saying, I'm sorry, but we're not going to attend. Those are the statistics that I would like to see, and some analysis of what criteria the police are using. And I'm wondering whether you would be able to use your good offices with the Chief Constable to see if those that sort of information is available. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Your discussion with me was what prompted my conversation on Monday when I heard that it wasn't working the way it should do. So I'm hoping that you will get a fast response. Regarding the others, do we have data now, or can we bring that back to another meeting? Which can we do?
I'm not sure we could do it justice now, bearing in mind the time constraints, but we could certainly bring it back to another meeting or provide it separately. But we have extensive data on that.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm one of the longest serving councillors, and we've worked together, Commissioner Sidwick, over the years, and I have noticed an improvement over those years in contact with the police. I represent live in a very high crime area, as you're well aware of. You've been there many times in residents' meetings. When we had a spike in crime a couple of years ago when you were first in place, there was a plan put in place with a good officer. Crime went down by, I think, around 80% over a year, which was very good. That officer then was moved. We have a new officer who's very good, and when there's an issue in my ward, she does telephone me and speak to me. But I find that since the numbers have gone down, so has the crime numbers gone down. Obviously, the focus on my ward has lessened due to a decrease. I moved to higher areas with issues. It just concerns me that it could be perceived as taking the foot off the brake and potentially allowing a further increase in crime. Can you assure me that areas that see decreases in crime do not then come off the radar, and that they are maintained as with a watchful eye?
Well, look, that's a very operational question, but let me be very clear of what my view is on that. I would expect the Chief Constable to allocate resources according to where those resources are needed. So if it's become a low crime area, great. You may not have officers piling in the way that they needed to in the past, but then again, you don't need them piling in the way that they did in the past. I would still expect the local neighbourhood policing team to do their job. I would still expect, and let's remember that one of the success factors that Robert Peel put in place right at the start was the absence of crime is a success factor for the police. So I would expect them still to be engaged with you, engaged with the populace, making certain that it stays the way it is. And if crime spiked and it wasn't being dealt with, then I would expect to hear about it if you didn't get a quick response from your usual sources. Does that make sense? Does that reassure you? Thank you.
Priority 3, please.
So priority 3 is the fight violent crime and high harm. This is the things which keep me awake at night. What we can see here, though, is that the most serious violence versus the 2019 baseline has continued to go down, down another 7%. Domestic abuse crime and incident reports have gone up, which I have to say, to my mind, is a good thing because we know that they are underreported. I'm not going to talk for hours. The chair will be very happy to know this about addiction and substance misuse because we've got a whole paper on it. I will raise some of the others. The violence against women and girls, as you can see, is very much a theme in the quarter report. During this quarter, we provided the funding for the Fresh Thoughts booklet, which I referred to earlier, which provides excellent guidance to female victims and survivors. One of the issues is, and one of the barriers to possibly breaking away from the relationship, is to know what is available to you. How do you navigate the fact that you may have to deal with getting another income or divorce or whatever else is needed? How do you navigate the legal system? This booklet helps immensely with that. And also during this quarter, I opened a Violence Against Women and Girls event. It was an honor to do so. This was about changing the culture to tackle violence against women and girls. And it was a very good event. I was happy to basically open it. It looked at, from a very, very strategic sense, what was needed in order to change that culture. Violence reduction is something which I'm very keen on. Panel members who have been here for a while have heard me talk about violence reduction on a number of occasions. We've now moved, and post holders within the OPCC, we have a violence reduction and prevention team. And that's working through options for how do we get a violence reduction partnership stroke violence reduction unit into Dorset. Again, this is something else I'd like to talk to individuals who can help me lobby in the future in order to basically make a difference with that. And then we talk about something which is one of the rottenest, evilest type of offences, and that's stalking. It used to be that you'd worry about going outside your house if you're being stalked. Now you worry about turning on your phone. It is absolutely disgusting. So I was very, very happy to run a campaign raising the awareness about harmful stalking behaviours. It included a powerful rom-com video, a suite of posters, social media, and an electronic display artwork. And I also highlighted the launch of the Victims Code campaign from the Ministry of Justice. So that was a very quick summary of number 3, but we'll be talking more about priority 3 in the main paper, Chair.
Thank you very much. We did have a question about the Pineapple project, but I believe that you've actually covered, certainly in your last sentences there, the initiatives that you are undertaking, which enables Dorset to become a safer environment for women. Are there any other additional points you'd like to make, or should we move on to the next question?
Chair, big mistake. I've got lots more I could say about the issue of violence against women and girls, and indeed other projects. So I wouldn't mind outlining some of them. Aside from the Pineapple Project expansion, which isn't just Weymouth, it's now expanding to Portland, Swanage and Dorchester. We also manage and fund many other ongoing projects to improve the safety of women and girls in public places and the nighttime economy. So there's additional CCTV in high priority areas. So these include, for example, just to name 3, Bournemouth, Sherborne and Weymouth, plus connectivity of cameras within town council areas into the CCTV control room. So we've got better surveillance. There's also the BCP Unity Promise, where 30 venues have signed up to the promise to actively promote night safety, demonstrating to staff and customers that their organisation takes women's safety at night seriously, and reminding customers and staff that whilst BCP as a whole is safe, any experiences of harassment should be reported. A sentiment I actively encourage. Alcohol and consent training. I briefly mentioned that earlier, that I've supported STARS to provide guidance and education of 15 to 20-year-olds in the school and university setting, covering alcohol and consent, bystander training, and respectful relationships. There's also now a single point of contact in Bournemouth and Poole College. This is a new role based within student welfare at the college that provides advice to both students and staff. There's also an initiative which I brought to the attention of Dorset, which was the Licensing Savvy. This is an industry standard self-assessment to help enable licensed venues identify opportunities to provide a safer and more secure environment. This includes topics such as violence against women and girls, drugs, drink spiking, violence, antisocial behaviour, theft, and burglary. I talked briefly earlier about the Vogue Practitioners event, and I think what I'd like to do is close this with saying that the issue of violence against women and girls is complex. We have to do something to cut off the idea that you would want to hurt women and girls. So that talks about the changing of the culture. That was partly the reason why I supported the Kingston Moorwood College event, which was looking at early years, where relationships and how you deal with relationships are formed. But there's a whole plethora of things, from making certain the environment is safe at night, to making certain our homes are safe from the point of view of domestic assault. So this whole thing in a Rubik's Cube, which is why I made the point earlier when I was talking about the letter, in that there is a lot of work going on, there is more to be done. Let's be collaborative, let's work together, let's all do our bit to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Very full.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that very full brief there, which I know the panel will appreciate. And as I said earlier on, we will come to the subject of Vogue as part of the future work plan. Patrick.
Just as a follow-up to that, some time ago, I think probably towards the end of last year, you commissioned some work with Safe Lives, and I just wondered whether that had come to a conclusion, that work had come to a conclusion now, or whether it was continuing.
Thank you. Can I have an update?
Sure, it's still ongoing. So Safe Lives are still doing their work. We've just, within the last week or so, I believe, received the interim report that they've done, and we're having a look through that. But their recommendations and findings are actively informing the ongoing work by doing around the domestic abuse advice service, which is the commissioning work. It's mentioned in the document. I know we provided updates before, which will be continuing over the next 6 months or so. But yes, it's ongoing, and hopefully soon, probably the next panel, we'll be able to talk about more detail from what they found in their interim report.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, I note your update on the Unity Promise scheme. This is something that I became aware of through our local pub watch group, where it's being rolled out to responsible licensees. I also note that the BCP Community Safety Team are offering training on the Unity Promise scheme at the BIC in September. I would also encourage all members to seek out your local pub watch if you can. It's a great way of integrating and discovering responsible licensees. Police licensing officers also attend, and also the neighbourhood policing teams attend. I've found it very worthwhile to keep up with this aspect. I have a secondary, if that's okay. So, we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the tragic loss of life of Cameron Hamilton due to knife crime in Bournemouth Square last year. We have had many discussions around seeking funding for a violence reduction unit and the positive aspects that that could bring in terms of nipping the escalation of violence in the bud and treating violence as a public health issue and taking a public health approach to violence reduction. I was very heartened to hear that funding has been found for the VRU, I believe. I wondered if you could give just a brief overview of the funding, potential rollout and format. I realise this could be a very large area, but just even a brief synopsis of when we can expect to see it in our areas. Thank you.
So the VRU funding, which was announced, there was a caveat applied to it, and you guys can correct me if my understanding is incorrect, but the caveat was, the statement was that every area would have funding for a VRU from the Chancellor. We have yet to see the practical manifestation of that. So we don't quite understand what that is going to be. We are hopeful, but of course, let's be honest, that was the previous government, and I believe there was a caveat around it that it was subject to the spending review. Well, we haven't seen the detail. So I can't talk to the central funding for a VRU, apart from to say that it was given to 22 forces around the country. And although we're a very safe place, we're the 5th lowest in the country for knife crime when you look at the numbers of knife offences. I would rather we got ahead of this because we know too many young people, generally in the UK, but specifically also in Dorset, are carrying knives. So I would be very heartened to have that funding. Nevertheless, and because of what we've seen, two things. I am supportive of knife crime awareness, and indeed have supported and know Cameron Hamilton's immediate family. I have used my funds to, as I said, basically start a violence reduction and prevention team within the OPCC. My violence reduction and prevention manager is at the moment putting together options for what this could look like. We are a little bit strapped because we don't know what money we've got to play with. I know that I've got a bit of money, I am hoping that the councils might also assist, but I know their situation with money. We will see what we get to, and we will see what we can deliver. But I'm determined that we do something, because if we don't, we will be sitting here in 10 years' time having the same discussion. And I believe in prevention and getting ahead of it. So again, I know this is beginning to sound repetitive, but I would be delighted to talk to the elected members who are capable of lobbying in that regard. And I'm looking forward to my first meeting with them because I have a list, as you can tell. And that would be one of them. Is there anything? No, that is the situation where we've got to. We haven't heard anything definitive out of central government around the VRU funding.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for your question, Alistair. It's sort of chimes with what I was going to go down the path of. I know your VRU was funded through reserves. What is the long-term funding? You've answered that. You don't know at the moment, and I know it's something that you will work on over the forthcoming months, if not years. Patrick, have you got a question on knife crime at all?
Yes, thank you. A review of projects such as the Knife Crime Awareness Campaign will generate further understanding of ways to prevent knife crime and related forms of criminality. To what extent can intelligence be gathered to better understand the most difficult challenge of prevention?
Well, as I said earlier, Dorset remains a safe county with a comparative very low rate of knife-enabled crime. Therefore, whilst gathering local intelligence will always be helpful, and certainly a focus for local delivery partners such as the community safety partnerships and the police, the OPCC is also able to leverage significant learning from other areas and challenges, and also to understand the national best practice established through the National Network of Violence Reduction Units. So my team, and indeed the Violence Reduction and Prevention Manager, will be going out to other forces and looking at the best practice around knife crime awareness in order to do that. So that's built my office's capability and expertise in the area of prevention. So I think, look, I'm looking forward to telling you much more about this as we go forward, but I've now got the framework in place that it's not just the bits that we know here, we're now collecting from around the country as well. Bearing in mind, of course, that their local situation may not be exactly the same as ours, but what works there, we can look and judge whether it would work here.
Yes, there's a lot of work going on, in this area. I get that. I'm just troubled by it being a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. And I would be gratefully reassured if somebody could tell me if there is somebody who was able to complete that jigsaw.
Well, I think I just said that we are completing the jigsaw because I've now got a violence reduction and and prevention manager within the office whose work is dedicated to doing exactly that. Do you want to add something?
I think I sense your frustration, Councillor Canavan, and I think you probably sense ours. We've talked about violence reduction a number of times in this forum. It is good that Dorset finds itself in a position of being fifth lowest for knife crime, but the downside of that means that we don't therefore attract national funding for a violence reduction unit. The likelihood is that we don't want to find ourselves in a position whereby we are high up on that knife crime table to be in a position whereby you attract national funding, which is a bit of a perverse incentive really, but that is the way that national funding is given. What we do have locally, and every area has this, is the serious violence duty. So that funding goes directly to the two community safety partnerships. It's equally split between Dorset Council and BCP Council. As the Commissioner has said, our office is very tied into the delivery of that, and there is obviously encompassing strategies in both BCP and Dorset about the delivery of knife crime. What we hope to do through the OPCC team is to identify the gaps that exist, because obviously that is a finite pot of money. So what we're hoping to be able to do is to identify any gaps that exist and to see if we can leverage the relatively small amount of money that the Commissioner may have to actually help fill some of those gaps. Obviously, we're also, as the Commissioner has said, because we are tied into the national and because we're working at a larger geographic level, we're also trying to see if there's opportunities to bring together some of the work to amplify it across both community safety partnerships. Recognising that both Dorset and BCP are in different places in time, there is therefore an opportunity, though, to try and leverage both the ongoing strategy and the sustainability. And the sustainability is the key thing here, because we've identified that actually we've got no confirmation from government whether or not the serious violence duty funding will continue. So that's something that we need to be aware of as well. So at the moment, the considerations that we're having as a unit within the OPCC is to say, how can we actually protect that work that we're currently invested in through the serious violence duty? How can we amplify that? How can we sustain that over time? Those are quite challenging conversations, as you'll appreciate. Councillor Canavan, I mean, you're absolutely right. The situation is complex. I do wish someone would come along and wave a magic wand, but this is the nature of the complexity in which we're dealing with, I'm afraid.
Apologies if I've missed this in this debate, but we've mentioned a couple of times that Dorset is fortunate enough to be fifth lowest, which I think is great. Is that analysis go any lower than that? Because I think if we told our residents that Dorset was the fifth lowest in BCP, they probably wouldn't believe us, because Dorset has a big rural community, and I think looking at Bournemouth specifically, or maybe Poole as well, or maybe Weymouth or other areas, might be beneficial. Thank you.
So yes, the force does do that analysis. But you alluded to it earlier about the fear of crime. And it wasn't helped earlier in the year when it was suggested that there were 300 stabbings in Bournemouth, which was palpably untrue. And I think the number, and I may be slightly out of date, but the number of knife offences for the whole of Dorset is just over 300. So when I looked at that, when I got the analysis from the force, and if we talk about Bournemouth Town Centre, which is what they were alluding to with their 300, it was 4. So I think we have to contextualise where we are, and actually we have to put the truth of those numbers out. But we also have to recognise that no matter what the numbers are, when you have a tragedy like we have, then the numbers are meaningless. And that's the point. So whilst we have the numbers, they do not in any way drive complacency, which is why I'm fighting as hard as I can to get the VRU up and running with all the complexities and the jigsaw that Councillor Canavan alluded to. So I hope that gives some context around that.
Thank you very much. Interesting what you should say there. There's a statistic out the other day that as of 2024, violence, burglary and car crime have been declining for the last 30 years, and by close to 90% according to the Crime Survey for England and Wales, which chimes with what you were saying there, Peter. Priority 4.
Thank you. So priority 4 is to fight rural crime. So basically, there's a number of things here which I'd like to bring to your attention. There we go. So basically, what we did was we started something called the Dorset Partners Against Rural Crime. And that every quarter looks at a number of items, one of which is rural resources. So this is basically the rural crime team and the equipment they've got in order to do the job they do. We know very clearly that a lot of the, if not the majority of rural crime is organised. If you have a tractor pinched That's organised crime group here, probably talking to an organised crime group across the channel in order to get it on a ferry and sold. So where we are with that is basically we're getting more and more successful prosecutions. I talk in the report of 4 offenders, including 2 for wildlife crime, 2 for farm thefts. And some of these offenders are now getting significant sentences. Interestingly, the wildlife crime offences, that was for poaching. Now, actually, the sanction for poaching is relatively small. But actually, the way that they actually killed these deer in this case was significantly cruel, which allowed the prosecutor to bring in wildlife crime acts in order to basically make that point. So I'm really pleased that they've started doing that. Country Watch, the Rural Mounted Volunteers. If you remember, we started these. They're now out patrolling local areas. This is a neighbourhood watch on horseback. We've got a further 5 volunteers currently going through recruitment and indication. I also commissioned a rural crime prevention leaflet in collaboration with the D-Park partners, which inform rural communities of local issues and provide prevention advice. Fly tipping, which is an really annoying offence for everybody. Basically, what I've done is I've supported a role which will gather evidence of fly tipping offences as well as map hotspots for proactive enforcement and prevention. So that role, which is in Dorset Council, will help their enforcement team do a better job from the point of view of getting prosecutions. Regarding wildlife crime, there's also the issue of cross-border working. I went out on Op Galileo, which works with Wiltshire and Hampshire police forces. Basically, the hare coursers and poachers roam across the borders between us, and basically close partnership working is really important in order to show that we don't see borders and they are in danger of being addressed wherever they are. And you can see the rural crime team told me that there'd been a 20% reduction in the reports of poaching offences. Since they've been more joined up, there's been more of them, and they've been doing more of this sort of work. So overall, the rural crime continues to fall. In the policing crime plan, I've said very clearly, I expect the rural crime team to be maintained at its current level. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, 2 priority leads are not at this meeting today. Does anybody have any follow-up questions? Peter?
Rural crime not really being my area, not having a rural area, but the fly tipping you mentioned, is that just in Dorset Council? Because we obviously have a significant issue in BCP, and it seems we get confused between what the council do and what the police do. Currently in BCP, the fly tipping is left there for 2 weeks for our external contractor to do their own investigations. Meanwhile, we just get pummeled with emails saying, why aren't you clearing it up? And why aren't the police involved? And so I think some clarity in joining up around that might be useful as well, please.
So I think the clarity is actually in your question. From the point of view of BCP Council have contracted it out to a third party. Yeah, and they actually do the investigation. It takes them a period of time in order to do that. And the police will work with them to do the necessary. But obviously somebody has to do that investigation piece. That wasn't happening in Dorset Council. There was nobody doing the investigation piece. So that's why I was able to help in that regard. So it sounds to me like we've got the same thing going on in both places now, which wasn't occurring beforehand. So I hope that helps clarify. But in both cases, I would expect in BCP's case, the council and their third party to work with the police, and I would expect Dorset Council to work with the police, which I know goes on. I know both those things go on. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Moving on to priority 5.
Priority 5 is about putting victims and communities first. So, first of all, let's talk about criminal justice and restorative justice. So we had a review of our restorative justice, the restorative mediation cases. We showed that 69% of those cases had no further incidents reported following mediation. So that, I think, shows a good result for restorative justice. I'm happy that we are getting no further cases occurring as it says. There are some other things here, though, that I'd like to also highlight. Look, the big ticket item in this priority was the issue of business and retail crime, which I put in the communities because it was a community which had been neglected before I came into office. That is one change I'll highlight. I'm moving it out of priority 5 into priority 1 to cut crime because of the as we know, the increasing issue around shoplifting, which we've seen. During this quarter, I was very happy to support the launch of the BCP Business Crime Reduction Partnership. This is where the business improvement districts have come together in BCP to basically try and reduce crime. And one of the significant things which they are doing is they've basically taken on board something which I brought into Dorset and showed to them, which was the UK Partners Against Crime, the UK PAC system of Century SIS. That's a new service for businesses. What it does is it links up information. It links up information around prolific shoplifting. It helps the police, and also UK PAC will help support the paperwork required for prosecutions. Now, I've also, separate to this, commissioned UK PAC to help with 200 shops outside of business crime reduction, business improvement districts in order to do the same thing. So this will help get better information, better prosecutions. In addition to that, I mentioned it earlier, Operation Shopkeeper. The pilot has seen ongoing success, providing good results on prolific and high-harm retail offenders. As a result of the pilot, it's now agreed that that will continue as business as usual. Now, the other thing I'll say is I also recall that there was some legislation coming forward around business crime and retail crime in particular. It is slightly opaque where that went because of the change in government. I am hoping it comes forward in their police and crime bill when it comes back. That talked about tagging of prolific shoplifters. It talked about the use of technology by stores, those sorts of things. So we'll see where we get to with that. We've agreed a 6-month extension to the Victim Services contract. This basically aligns now with commissioning timelines with partner agencies so we can explore future collaboration opportunities, which I think is a good thing. The more we can work together, the better, especially in financial constraint times, let's put it that way. The other point I'm going to make here is around the vulnerability section. So for some time now, I've been slightly concerned we're not doing enough for our elderly residents and our vulnerable residents, particularly around the issue of fraud. Now, look, this is complex. A story I was told by Dorset Police was about a vulnerable individual who had piles of post from lotteries and raffles and things. And their relatives were concerned, got the police involved, They were able to work with this person. This all went down. And then about 6 months later, they were called again because it happened again. And the comment from the person was they were the only people who talked to her on the phone. So there's complex things here. So I'm very happy to have partnered with Age UK on something called the Older Safer Initiative, which is a PCC commissioned initiative to prevent crime and promote wellness amongst our elderly and vulnerable. We've done things before where we've given out prevention leaflets to target groups. This is taking it a stage further and actually having group work and actually bringing the elderly and vulnerable in and talking to them directly about how they can protect themselves. So I'm very happy about that that's just started. The other thing here is the STARS Dorset, which continue to engage with marginalised communities. And in this quarter, STARS reported working with 89 individuals. And that will continue through the OPCC, what we're funding, and also the MOJ, which fund that service as well. So I'll pause there for any questions about Priority 5.
Just a quick question on Century Cis and UK PAC. I remember from previous panel meetings that 200 shops were being funded by the OPCC. Are licensed premises included in that? So bars, pubs, and the secondary there is what has the take-up been on the 200 licenses?
Regarding the take-up, we'll come back to you about that. We don't have that data with us. Bars and pubs were not what was thought of for this. It was about the shoplifting and the retail crime. So no, they wouldn't be within that 200. We were targeting shops. We do, however, have a different pilot, which was done through Dorset Police and UK PAC, for licensed premises in the centre of Bournemouth, which does a similar thing, but that's looking at, for example, using the same technology. What they would do is share a picture of a person who was barred, for example. They would share that amongst the other venues, so they would know if they kicked him out of here, he can't just go in somewhere else. Or if it was somebody who had a known history of violence, for example, then they would obviously communicate with those sorts of things. That's possibly what you're thinking of. Yeah, so that's a separate thing, but it's using the same technology, and indeed they will be able to link up eventually, so they can share information about people who have multiple offences, shall we say.
Is there a cost associated with licensed premises outside of that town centre area involving in the scheme?
My belief is the pilot is only in the town centre area at the moment.
I met with UK PAC to talk about that. I believe the pilot actually is free for the 200. That's certainly what I understood it for the shops in my ward.
Yeah, it's free for the 200 because I'm paying for the 200. So it's not free, but I'm very happy to do that because I want... The vision is if we can get the BCP area with the business improvement districts all using this, then we can get those 200 shops recruited. Then we can make a big production number about having this deterrent in Dorset to try and deter the shoplifting. It's one part of the puzzle. And there's lots of other things. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. Dorchester. The co-op in Dorchester was having a problem with shoplifters. And they were stealing booze. And so guess what? They put the booze in cabinets and their shoplifting's gone down. So there's so many different things which can be brought together, which is what I'm trying to do through the Dorset Safer Business Partnership and this other meeting I'm intending to have in with the retail chains. It's all parts of a jigsaw puzzle, to use the common parlance, that we need to bring together.
Thanks. I'd be interested in the take-up, detail of the take-up of who is not taking it up. I know we've spoken before. I've been unable to get the big store in our town to take it, and that would probably unlock the others, but they have been uninterested because of their workload. I go in and see the manager, and he's rushing around filling shelves up because they're so short. And so I know it's a problem. And they do get a good support from the local neighbourhood police team as well. And maybe they feel they're doing enough. I will revisit a couple of the other shops, see if I can get them to go. But it's frustrating because I know you're trying to do something and we can't get it working.
Yes, it is frustrating. And I think it's very important when this initiative is spoken about, that the shops understand two things. One, it's about information sharing, yes, but it also helps get the information together in order to have better prosecutions. I mean, that's the fundamental power of the Operation Shopkeeper, that the police changed their systems and the way they were doing things so they could very easily bring different offences together. So that instead of going to court with one shoplifting offence, they would go to court with 20 shoplifting offences. And obviously that makes a significant difference. So I think there is an element of how we sell it as well, which I'm looking into at the moment to see whether we've made enough noise about both those aspects.
Final point from me, if I may, the retail chains meeting. I think, I'm not sure if you said when that is, but when it is, if we could have an update without waiting for the next meeting of this group would be useful, because I've got 3 of those. I'm hoping that Marks and Spencer's, Boots and Tesco's are in there. And they are the 3 that probably create the problem in Broadstone. If, for example, you met with them and there was some positive feedback coming back, and I could simply take that to them, it might unlock it for me.
So here's the thing. We've tried on occasion for 3 years to get the retail chains in a room. I've now managed to get one of the retail chains in the room with myself and Dorset Police, the single point of contact for retail crime, which was a very good meeting. I am now trying to get the rest of them together, all right? So I don't have a date. The issue also is that there is a national initiative which is being done, which is called Project Pegasus. So as a national initiative, it may be that they feel that's enough. Personally, I don't think that is enough, because there are loads and loads of individual local issues that we can talk about. I know there's an appetite with some of them. It's trying to bring as many as we can together. So I will give you an update on progress, but we'll see where we get to before I do that, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just wondering, because we're kind of focusing on shoplifting here, is there anything you can elaborate on to do with, like, for example, high street vandalism, or even businesses that are have outside properties, like, for example, football clubs and things like that, where people are vandalizing the property? Would that be included in your kind of business and retail crime strategies? Do you have anything to address those kind of issues?
Where there would be a hotspot around that, I would expect the local neighbourhood policing team to be dealing with it. If that hotspot happens and they don't deal with it, I would expect it to be flagged either through their councillor to the local inspector and then dealt with. And then if that fails, then to come, I'm always here in order to address that. This is primarily around retail crime, though. There's enough to do with the increases in retail crime and the issues around it. I haven't had the same volume of people contact me around vandalism of places. Except I will say one thing. Where it has happened and people have contacted, they've normally contacted us through something called the Operation Relentless Community Fund, which is a fund to address antisocial behaviour. And we've protected 38 places. So it's a micro locality, they've got a problem, we'll help them with something to address the problem. And it could be CCTV. So there's a number of threads where we can pull on in order to help if that is an issue. But the Dorset Safer Business Partnership is primarily focused on retail crime, a bit on cyber crime as well. But that is less of a pressing priority from the point of view of the retail crime is happening every day, affects the retail community, but also affects the community in a wider perspective because people don't like seeing it.
Thanks very much. Good question. Tony, can you get straight to the question and not worry about the preamble?
Well, I was going to ask, and I'm a little bit uncertain about the difference between recorded hate crime and hate incidents, but it shows quite a significant increase in recorded hate incidents. Is that by any chance something to do with the Israel-Gaza conflict at the moment? Because it seems to have gone up quite significantly.
Yeah, that is generally what it is. It is the issue that we've seen through this quarter and the ongoing issue about the tensions around Israel and Gaza. And so that is why that has gone up. That's my understanding. That's the office's understanding. Yeah.
Can we move on to priority 6, unless anyone's got any more? Yeah, priority 6, please.
So, priority 6. This is about the money. And very clearly, we are going to maximise the use of every penny that we can. And some of that will also include using technology. Now, the sweet spot is where that technology actually provides a better service to the public as well as saving us money. And the reason I say it that way is I want to be very, very clear. There is something which has just been launched by Dorset Police called Enhanced Video Contact. And that is something in order to address the issues of the interview of the police with the public after an offence has happened, largely for 101 type offences when those have occurred. It does not and never will replace an officer in-person interview. It provides a choice to the public, a choice which members of the public may find very useful. So, for example, a domestic abuse incident. That person may not want a police car outside their house and the police obviously coming to visit them. They may prefer to actually have a video interview, which is what this provides. It may be that you are incredibly busy and that you find it very difficult to fit in an appointment at short notice, either to go to the police station or to have somebody come and visit you. But an online solution you would really appreciate. So we're, I think, the second force in the country to start trialling this. Well, we've gone beyond trialling this. The trial worked extremely well. I actually had somebody who coincidentally knew me personally phone me up and say what a whizzo system it was. I wanted to make that point because obviously it also helps from the money point of view, but the point behind it is to deliver a better service to the public. And that's now happening, and we've just gone, I think Dorset Police just went public with it this week. But look, we're Rubik's cubing the whole of the money. My team, myself, the force, we're constantly talking about how we can extract every single penny. The force is looking at a range of operational functions. They're looking at optimizing shift patterns, all that sort of thing. We've looked at things like response times. So we were talking about that earlier, but this is in the context of the whole response time. So this is the actual time to get somewhere. And so Dorset Police have identified opportunities to improve emergency dispatching. We're looking at how to improve the timeliness and the quality of service. We're looking at a phone book app so officers can look up numbers on the go much easier. We're looking at better connection between dispatchers and patrol, so there's an accurate overview of officer availability. All these things are being looked at in order to drive efficiencies. I want to thank you because it was also this quarter that the precept proposal was unanimously approved. That I am grateful for. And also when we're looking at philosophy and cooperation, there's also a new national code of ethics which was launched, which makes it simpler into 3 easier to recall principles of public service, courage, and respect and empathy. The PCC also, what we also did was highlight the launch of a new police anti-corruption and abuse reporting service to make certain that internally we are making certain that we are as effective, making certain we don't have criminals inside as we are outside. I'm not going to go on any more because I suspect there may be questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Commissioner. I think also it's worth highlighting that for the first time in 12 years, in order to illustrate how tight things are, you and Chief Constable were overspent by something like 300k, just over 300k. And that's the first time, as I just said, in 12 years that's happened, which gives a good indication. I noted that yourselves, as part of the Alliance, Devon and Cornwall Police and Dorset Police have entered into a 10-year IT services contract for public contact, mobile phones, body-worn video, and radio systems. Can you please confirm how this project is being funded, what scrutiny your office has undertaken of this project in order to ensure fairness for Dorset taxpayers, and how will success be benchmarked by his office? And when I say fairness, Devon and Cornwall are a larger organisation. You may buy 30 bits of kit, 10 for Dorset, 10 for Devon, 20 for Devon and Cornwall. So therefore, one would expect the funding to reflect that, shall we say. Over to you.
Thank you. So this contract is being funded through existing provisions for ICT servicing and maintenance. How it works is the contract was agreed by the Prison Board, of which the Chief Executive is a member. In terms of value for money, this contract is marginally cheaper than the anticipated costs of maintaining the previous in-house provision, but importantly improves the provision to the front line in terms of being available 24/7 to access technical support and expertise. So that's an improvement. Success is being measured through a variety of metrics which are separated into delivery towers, covering customer service, application services, end-user workplace, technical security, hosting services, data and voice network services, field mobile services, airwave services, which is the police radio system, and messaging and collaboration. My Chief Executive continues to robustly test the force assumptions around the delivery of the wider ICT programme and escalate any concerns to me. This is not a current one. And regarding your specific question about the split with Devon and Cornwall, I'll remind you that the priority of number 6 is that every penny counts for Dorset. We are clear that we are getting our fair share with this, and we've checked that.
Thank you for that. Following up, the National Police Chiefs Council have asked the Police Remuneration Review Body for an above inflationary pay award of 6%. The actual review body have recommended a pay rise of just under 5% to government. If endorsed, what impact will this have on finances?
So typically, forces build the expectation of a more realistic pay rise within their midterm financial plan. So, for example, a pay award of 2% was budgeted for September 2023 with an additional 1% held in contingency. This was in line with the assumption included within the comprehensive spending review and therefore our core grant funding. The pay award, as you may recall, was then confirmed at 7%. And as the vast majority of forces had not budgeted for this, central funding was made available to cover both this and the police staff pay award. I'll come back to that maybe in a minute. The expectation remains that should an above inflation pay award be agreed, that it will continue to be supported from central funding to meet this financial burden. Otherwise, let's be frank, it will not be sustainable from individual forces, us included. Now, I can tell you that the overall assumption, which all the forces have done, is, I think it's 2.5%. Yeah, it's 2.5%. So if it is anything higher than that, we will have the situation which we had last time, which is a situation where, whilst it says it is fully funded, because of the way it is actually dispersed through the funding formula, it would wind up being that Dorset would actually have a shortfall. And so if we look at the 6%, which was mentioned, this would result in additional costs of 2.9 million in 2024-25, 5 million in 2025-26 when the full year effect is felt for both officers and staff. Assuming that a central grant is distributed according to the funding formula, then we can expect a shortfall of 0.7 million in the current year and 1.2 million shortfall next year for us to find. So once again, if I'm blunt, we have the perversity of a outdated national funding formula, which I know isn't just my view, it is the view of every police and crime commissioner that has a similar force to ours, which is rural, urban and coastal. But it is also the view of somebody who has a voice and has made the point, and that is Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire Services, Andy Cook, who makes exactly the same point and calls on the government to address that issue now. And I make the same call because, quite frankly, it is unfair that in Dorset we don't get a penny for the rurality, we don't get a penny for the seasonality and the tourists who wind up on in our lovely county every year. And that the people of Dorset pay over 50% through the council precept for their force. And in other areas of the country, they pay 20%. And therefore, I join with Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire Services. And I say, it hasn't been done. It's a travesty it hasn't been done. But you're a new government. do it, and do it now, and get it sorted. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that forceful comment on the policing formula. Does anybody else have any questions on finance? No? Then we will move on to the next big paper, and thank you from myself and also the whole of the panel for the excellent piece of work that you've done on drugs, alcohol and gambling. That paper that I've just mentioned has briefed the panel expertly. Thank you also to Peter Sidway and Alistair Kelly for the key lines of inquiry. Really appreciate that and your work you put into that. Commissioner, if you could introduce and talk about item 7. I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end. We are more or less on time.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And I'm gratified that this paper has come to the panel. It is something that I care passionately about, is the issue of addiction in our society. I am not going to go through the paper paragraph by paragraph because you've all got it and can read it. I am going to pick out some themes within it. I am going to talk about some things around it. Addiction, in its wider sense, affects individuals in many ways. We've got those who are addicted to alcohol, we've got those who are addicted to drugs, we've got those who are addicted to gambling. We also have those who are addicted to porn and those who are addicted to gaming, to name a couple of others. There is a whole plethora of scientific studies, some of which is alluded to within the paper, of how addiction affects the physicality of somebody. Also within it is a very good list of some of the things which can predispose you to becoming an addict. Some of the life experiences dating back to and possibly even preceding your birth, which may predicate you in order to become addicted to substances. And I think it's important to understand that we have, if we look at the 3 areas, we have one area which we've lived with and dealt with for a very, very long time, that of alcohol. We've got another area which is constantly morphing and changing with new issues to be addressed, that of drugs. We've got a third area which has been the hidden area, which hasn't had a lot of attention, which is that of harmful gambling. And so that's why actually I changed with my co-chair the name of the portfolio that I've taken with the PCCs. It was called Alcohol and Drugs. It's now called Addiction and Substance Misuse. That deliberate change was to heighten the issue of harmful gambling. Something which occurs, and I'm going to deal with it first, something which occurs and is hidden, something which doesn't get the attention it needs, to the extent that trying to get attention on harmful gambling is very difficult at the highest level. What we have done is we've basically worked and put together a checklist of 20 asks and takeaways which PCCs can use with their force and the wider criminal justice system. I'm not going to talk for hours about this, but here's a simple thing. If somebody comes into custody, they are asked if they're addicted to drugs. They are asked if they have a problem with alcohol. They're not asked about their gambling. They are in Dorset now. There is the ARA, which is a provider which we direct them to now, which we weren't doing before. That's a provider which nationally has a 97% satisfaction rating. So this is something which we're going to be hearing more of. We know that there is a cross-match between harmful gambling and suicide. We know there is a cross-match between harmful gambling, other addictions, and other areas of criminality. We also know, and it is quite staggering, that something like I think it's 25%, 26% of 11 to 17-year-olds use their own money to engage in gambling activities. Now, that could be an arcade game when they go on holiday in the summer with their parents. But it could be that they're pumping £2 into a slot machine on a regular basis. And if you do that, those slot machines can get through literally thousands in a day. And those arcades are opening up on our high streets. They're meant to be for adults. But how rigorous is their bouncer, their security, whatever? And there's something else, which is why I wanted to include this and why we've put it in the paper. It is also absolutely in the frame of organised crime groups. It is a great way to launder money. In county lines, some of the kids get paid in lottery tickets. There are Facebook raffles which aren't legislated. There is a whole plethora of stuff going on below the surface. And that's why I wanted to heighten it. That's why we've put it in the paper. That's why we're saying we're going to make a difference about it. And endorse it, as I say, we've got the 20 checklists, 20 things on the checklist which we work through. We've brought it to the attention of the criminal justice system. We've put them in touch with those who can train on harmful gambling in order to address it. And before I leave it, because I am aware that we've got very little time to do a big subject justice, but before I leave it, I just want to heighten another area which we're also lobbying about. The investigative body is the Gambling Commission when something happens. And that's great, but it's not all joined up. So if somebody, let's say you, and I'm not picking on you for any particular reason, but let's say you decided I'm going to gamble my life away, and you've got through your family money, you've got through your friends' money, those who will lend it to you, and you've started pinching it from work. You are caught. You have cooperated. You're absolutely gutted. You didn't want to be in this situation. You've had this addiction. You are completely mortified about it. You have cooperated to the hilt. The Gambling Commission will then go to the gambling companies that you used. Now, they have been recipients of stolen goods in a way, because the cash wasn't yours to gamble with. So they should give that back. Problem for you, though, is you go to court, Gambling Commission does its thing, doesn't talk to the judge. The judge then gives you a POCA, Proceeds of Crime Act. Who does that hit? Doesn't hit you, you've got no money. Only thing you got left is your house, which your wife and your kids live in. So there is this thing about getting the justice right and not creating more vulnerability around this issue. It's not the same as a drug dealer who's living off the proceeds of his ill-gotten gains. So that's another aspect which I thought the panel might be interested in, which we're campaigning on a national basis to try and make certain we get that right. Because, quite rightly, those people who are victims of the crime and have had the money stolen want their money back. That should come back from the gambling companies to them. But I don't think it makes any sense putting your family on the street when they probably didn't even know you were doing it. So that's all I'm going to say about harmful gambling. I wanted to heighten the issue. I wanted to say that we're doing things in Dorset in order to address it. And I wanted to make you aware of some of the wider issues that we're addressing. So I'm not going to go through the rest of it in the paper because I want to move on to the other areas. When we come to alcohol, it is quite staggering in many ways the way that this is completely acceptable in our society. But the fact that people are overdoing it isn't heightened. I mean, there are some figures in the paper. The fact that we have the highest number of women in the country drinking to excess. So what do we do about that? Well, that isn't within purview of the Police and Crime Commissioner. That is more in the purview of public health. However, where the criticality comes is where alcohol is used to excess and then turns into something else, whether that's antisocial behavior on our streets or whether it is violence, and we know that alcohol is implicated significantly in violence. And generally the issue that we're most worried about there is in two places. One place is on our roads, which we know about, and I will always support drink driving initiatives from Dorset Police. And I'll publicise it, I'll make a noise about it. We need to do the same for drugs, but I'll park that for a moment. So how do we address the issue of violence on our streets? The majority of it occurs due to alcohol, occurs in the nighttime economy. We're very lucky in Dorset that we have one of the safest places. I serve on something called ARCH, which is the Home Office initiative around alcohol and homicide. And that is looking across the country. And again, there are initiatives. We don't satisfy the criteria to be a pilot for them because we are safer from that point of view. But we have too much induced antisocial behavior and violence on our streets. What do we do about that? Well, the most obvious thing is to do exactly what's been done. For example, in the centre of Bournemouth, where we've got Operation Nightjar, Operation Fireglow, and patrol hotspot areas. But it's also fundamentally where we have to have close relationship with our venues. So pub watch, all those sorts of things. And the police licensing body has to have a close and productive relationship with the licensing bodies on the councils. Now, I've sat in the meetings of the police licensing body where almost weekly in the summer there is a meeting between the licensing from Dorset Police and the venues, the nightclubs, etc., and what's going on there in order to make them as safe as possible. We talked about El Save earlier. That's another aspect to making this safe. Slight digression. I was brought up in an off licence. My father's greatest fear was losing his licence. He would not serve a drunk. He would not serve kids underage. There are too many premises with licences who do that. And therefore, I'm very clear that the licensing process, both from the council and the police, should be joined up to making certain that those premises lose their licenses. Because if they're prepared to do that, what else are they prepared to do? And then having put in custody somebody or arrested somebody with an alcohol issue, what are we going to do? Now, if it's somebody who is completely addicted, they need help, and there are organisations where they can be directed to. But if they are a binge drinker and they're constantly binging, I am a great believer that the idea of the, I will call it a sobriety tag, is a useful one. Because this actually looks at the alcohol in the sweat and can tell the police if somebody has broken their conditions and is drinking again. And that not only helps the police, but it helps that person. It helps them cut their addiction, which is driving their behaviour. I'm a great believer in the use of out-of-court disposals for this sort of thing, and you will see in the paper there is an exposition about immediate justice, which I campaigned to the Home Office to be part of the things that we should get. So this is where somebody actually does reparative work, which the community sees for a low-level offence. Obviously, an alcohol ASB type offence would be logical in order to do that. So I'm a great believer in that. That's another one of those things where we don't know where it's going to go next, depending on extra funding in the future. So I'm going to leave that now, and deliberately I've left half my time to talk about, in my view, the big ticket item, the issue of drugs in our society. We know that nationally, 50% of the murders are associated with drug-related issues. We know that 50% of the theft and 70% of the shoplifting. But recently, something else which is quite disturbing has come to the fore as well. We started off this whole panel meeting talking about the issue of violence against women and girls. And when we come to domestic violence, what we've just started doing is we've started and we've received money from the government to help with this, though the previous government then took half of it away. But it's drug testing on arrest. Now, the pilot was in South Wales. And the pilot found that of 150, I think it was, men who were brought in for domestic assault incidents, 85% of them tested positive for cocaine and or with opioids. 85%. Now, it's not different here. We've started this, 23 out of 27, same thing. So to me, if we could address the drug issue, then we would address a lot of the other issues in our society. And within my gift as Police and Crime Commissioner, that's something which I believe I absolutely should try and do. But I think it's really important to understand that when you look at drug policy, we've always got it wrong. The drug policy through the ages has vacillated. The national drug policy has vacillated from One side where you lock everybody up, to another side where you lock nobody up. And so what you need, and there is a wonderful document, it's in 2 parts, done by somebody called Dame Carol Black. She was commissioned to do a review of the drug situation in the UK. It is a fantastic document. I recommend you reading it, but it's rather a chunky document. Basically, what it did was it looked at the market. I have to say that will be out of date because the market changes almost, but not quite on a monthly basis. And then also what was required to fix it. And it talks about 3 things which common sense I've been talking about. You need tough enforcement. You need to cut the supply. You need effective treatment on those who are addicted. And you need impactful prevention. And how this has come to pass from those 2 documents is through something called the From Harm to Hope 10-year drug strategy, which myself and the co-chair were asked to input to as part of our portfolio work. And what that says is exactly that. Those 3 things need to be addressed. They gloss it up a bit and they call it something quite different. They want a world-class treatment system. They want to cut generational demand, but it's the same thing. Tough enforcement, effective treatment, impactful prevention. And so when I came into office, I made it very clear to Dorset Police, because we have the priority in priority 3 around addiction, that I wanted there to be tougher operations around the drug dealers. And I took it further. I spoke to my colleague, the PCC for Devon and Cornwall, and through her, we decided we would take it to the Southwest Collaboration Board. So the 5 PCCs in the Southwest challenged their forces and said, we want a collaborative approach to this. We want something where we can really take a message, not just to the drug dealers, but also to the communities, that we are serious about addressing this issue. That became Operation Scorpion. And you see that there are figures in the paper for the last iteration of Operation Scorpion. Now that combines 2 things. It combines something called the Ring of Steel. And that's where we truly collaborate across the Southwest. We use every automated number plate recognition asset that we each individually have, and we plug it together to plug gaps. We work with the British Transport Police to try and stop the stuff coming in on the trains. We work with Crime Stoppers to try and build the intelligence. We work with the Southwest Regional Organised Crime Unit, which has the responsibility for dealing with organised crime and has the intelligence and some of the assets which Dorset Police don't have in order to address the issues that we've got. Operation Scorpion has also had a theme every time. It has been instrumental, and part of the work of it has been to cut county lines. We have lowered the risk assessment for county lines in the Southwest. In Dorset, we have in the last year closed 50 county lines. Now that is a significant proportion of the ones we know. Of course, we never know all of them. And that is one of the issues we have, is getting as much intelligence in from the public as possible. You will have seen that I've spoken to the public in many ways in order to try and drive that, to make that point. Don't lose heart, because Dorset Police will build cases against drug dealers. We took 37 on-street drug dealers off the streets in Scorpion 7. We'll continue to do it. We've also got Operation Viper, which used some of the uplift to work with our county lines team to address county lines and community drug dealing in our communities, and that's not a quarterly operation. That's all the time. Now, that's what we were doing. We've also got other things going on, but we are now administering this whole issue through something called the Combating Drugs Partnership, which I, as PCC chair, that brings together every partner, including things like housing, including things like those with lived experience, every partner, in order to address the enforcement, the treatment, and the prevention. A couple of other aspects which I'm not going to go into. We didn't put it in the paper. We are not going to talk in detail for obvious reasons. But Dorset Police is also looking at what they can do about what's called fast parcels. So those are the things which come through the post with drugs in them. And they're also working very hard in order to address issues in our prisons. So there is a comprehensive strategy around reducing drugs from the enforcement side. From the treatment side, when From Harm to Hope came out, we were in it, but not for the right reasons. Bournemouth was shown to be the 9th highest for crack cocaine and heroin use. It was also in there, 8th highest for complex needs. Now, it would have been great if we'd got the 9th highest amount into treatment. We didn't, but we got a significant amount into treatment, which was £1.4 million. That means that we have more people going into treatment recovery than we had before. The government has targets for combating drugs partnerships. What I can tell you is that from the treatment recovery point of view, we are exceeding those targets for non-opioid drug addiction and for the young. We are not exceeding those targets yet for opioids. That is in common with the national picture. There's more work to be done in that area, which is being looked at. The other aspects around treatment which I'll mention is something called continuance of care. Chair, do I take questions in the middle or do I wait till the end?
Well, we are 1:45.
Yeah, and I still want to do prevention. I'll take them at the end. Yeah, I'll take it at the end. Continuance of care is where you're in prison, you come out on probation. It is completely and utterly understandable that if you are still have an addiction and you come out and you were actually being helped with your addiction in prison and suddenly you go off a cliff edge, you may start being addicted again. Continuance of care has a target of 75% of people getting continuous support. We are doing really well as combating drugs partnerships. The figures are in the paper. That's an area which we should continue to improve. The last point I'll make about treatment, which I'll do briefly, is that of heroin replacement. So the standard heroin replacement option is methadone at this moment in time. That, in my view, is a replacement of an addiction by another addiction. There are other options which are now come to the market. There's a long-acting buprenorphine, which you can give on a weekly and indeed monthly basis. The drug commissioning services are looking at how that is adopted and are starting to adopt it. That, to my view, is a much better option because it allows the person to focus on the other aspects of their lives they need to address. Maybe that's housing, maybe that's employment, could be lots of other things. So it is about, for those who are addicted, making certain they have the best possible avenue into recovery. We are skating the surface, all right? This is a vastly complicated subject. And the biggest problem we have is we keep trying to reduce it to simplicity. nowhere more than in prevention. Now, prevention in Dorset, we've had to pick what we're going to prevent. The issue of to stereotype, the party use at weekends of cocaine, that issue, we've decided that will not be within the remit of the Combating Drugs Partnership. But the issue of trying to stop our young people getting into drugs in the first place will be. This is the orphan at the feast. There is no money given nationally down to us for prevention. And I'm very clear that if I can do a little bit in that space, I'm going to do it. Because we talked about the criminality harm earlier. Let's be clear. Drugs also have individual harms. They also fracture families and communities. And some of the drugs which get less attention are, I never use the word recreational. I did notice it crept into the paper, but I won't use that word. I talk about illegal gateway drugs because that's what they are. The issue of nitrous oxide. I'm proud that we got that now an illegal drug because I campaigned through 2 Home Secretaries with my co-chair in order to do that. Because in Holland, they've seen a huge increase in road deaths from it. And that's one of the issues with it. And there are some terrible stories here. MDMA, we've had 3 deaths in Dorset. Ketamine will kill you. I used to be in charge of the legal marketing of ketamine. You should never take it on a long-term basis because it rots. It rots your anatomy between the outside and your kidneys. We have young people who have to wear nappies now because of ketamine. And then the issue of cannabis. The issue not just of leading on to other things, the issue of the driving with cannabis. We had an instance in Wimborne recently where a cyclist was killed, and that person was high on cannabis and alcohol. It's linked with cancers, it's linked with birth defects, it's linked with mental health issues. We know about the psychosis. We have to do far more. But I'm afraid this is not like Zamo at Grange Hill, right? The don't say no. That won't work. If you tell a teenager not to push a red button, their brains are actually developing, and the risk behavior is part of the developing brain. So we've got to have a different way of addressing it.
Okay, sorry, panel. Sorry, Commissioner, to interrupt you. We may have to finish the meeting fairly close to 1 o'clock. So just conscious that we've still got some more business, so we may need to move at quite a pace in terms of the rest of the questioning. The other issue, extending above it at all, because we're approaching that 3-hour mark within our constitution, we will need to put it to a vote to extend. So I'll come back to that in a minute if we're in that position. But there is a sort of another booking that would need to come into the chamber, possibly at 1 o'clock. So we're going to need to move along at a bit of a pace. Okay.
So I'm nearly there. So what we had was we had the Safer Schools team go into school with something called Drugs and the Law. Now, that's great if you don't want to go to America. That's great if you want to be a lawyer or a police officer. Actually, the feedback was the kids knew all about the drugs. They've known about the drugs since they've had a mobile phone and somebody's tried to sell it to them. They also know about some of the legal consequences. So that will work for some of them. It's a very good talk. But we needed other things. We now have the Wasp's Nest, a dramatic presentation on county lines, which is brilliant. If you haven't seen it, and you get an opportunity, go see it. That I'm supporting to go around schools in Dorset. I've commissioned what was the Alcohol Education Trust, which is now the Talk About Trust, to put together an educational program for schools on vaping, alcohol, cannabis, other illegal gateway drugs and county lines. That's the 4 modules. And that is being rolled out. It's being piloted. It's being rolled out this autumn. That is group work. Again, it is not saying, don't do it. It is saying, here's the reasons why you may want to make an informed choice. And there are other initiatives as well, but time forbids me getting into them. I think in summary, what we've always had is trying to be simplistic around this issue. We have to adopt the whole strategy of enforcement, treatment, and prevention, and make certain that we've got it right. And dare I say it, the gap I perceive at the moment in prevention is no money, but also we're not going young enough. 6 is the age of a kid in county lines that I've heard of. And on that sobering note, I'll conclude my talk on this issue. You can tell I'm passionate about it. This, to me, fundamentally drives a lot of the other problems that we've got in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm sure the panel will be probably would like, shall we say, a more in-depth meeting on this in an informal briefing as part of a training day in the future, because it is a very important subject and your passion comes through. I apologise to you for the slight hiccup on the timing that we're supposed to be out of this chamber. I'm not going to take questions now, right now. I'm going to go straight to item 8, get that out of the way, and then we will come back to any questions. Mark.
Okay, before so the item 8 is the election of the chair and vice chair. Can I just check, first of all, that if we do go slightly beyond 1, if we are permitted to do so, that everyone is comfortable to do that? So could I just ask for a proposal, first of all? Yeah, and seconder? Yeah, and just a quick raise of hands. Perfect. Thank you. So, Chair, this is your last meeting as chair. So firstly, can I thank you for your service as chair of the panel for a number of years. It's been a pleasure working with you. We need to elect a new chair and a vice chair for the panel ahead of the October meeting. So if we take each of those roles one by one, starting with the chair, do I have a proposer for a chair for the meeting? Okay, so that's a proposal for Councillor Keddy. Is there a seconder for that? Okay, some seconders there. And can I just have a quick raise of hands? Okay, so that's Councillor Keddy elected. Congratulations as chair. And in terms of vice chair, do I have any proposers for vice chairs? Oh, sorry.
Nominate Louise Bown, please.
Okay.
I would also like to nominate Dr. Elizabeth Mitten, who's unable to be here today, unfortunately.
Okay, and Councillor Trent, did you have one too?
I'd like to second Louise Brown.
Do we have a seconder at all for Dr. Mitten? Okay, so that's we have a proposer and seconder for both. So first of all, then for Councillor Bowen, could I have a raise of hands for those in support? Okay, so that's 4. And for Dr. Mitten, could I have a raise of hands? Okay, that's also 4. So in which case, and I'm hoping we weren't going to get to this, but on that stage, I just need to, unfortunately, toss a coin between the 2 candidates. So if you bear with me a second. You just bear with me 1 second, whilst we just check a few of the rules and regs. Okay, so sorry, we're just seeking some clarification there. So will be a toss of a coin. Councillor Canavan.
All councillors are present. Is it possible to do this another time when all councillors will be able to participate?
We've certainly got the chair elected, so we could pick, if everyone is in agreement, and we'll perhaps put that to a vote, we could pick that up at the next meeting. So that's a good proposal there, Councillor Canavan. Does anyone second that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, and can I just have a raise of hands to make sure everyone is comfortable with that? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for that suggestion.
Sorry for the interruption, Commissioner. So I'd like to take questions on the paper that the Commissioner has taken. Louis.
Yes, thank you very much. Can I ask the Commissioner, do you intend to continue to campaign to have cannabis reclassified? I hope it's a yes, because that is something I do support. I find that when I look at drug strategies across the world, the ones that are legalizing them are failing. The most effective ones are countries like Japan that prioritize possession. Can I ask if you will prioritize possession as part of your policy as a means of prevention? And if you do, I mean, I represent a very working class area. I'm a working class lad myself. What concerns me is youngsters from working class backgrounds with possession of things like cannabis far too often get targeted compared to very middle class youngsters with possession of things like cocaine. And I'm afraid that I often find there's a bit of a unfairness around that. Thank you.
Really interesting questions. Chair, this is one question which will probably take hours to talk to, but I'm going to try and be brief. Firstly, you asked me, will I continue my campaign around it? 4 out of 5 PCCs in the Southwest all feel the same way around it. We know that the advisory committee on the misuse of drugs haven't looked at cannabis since 2008 as an entity. And since that time, the new data around the birth defects and the cancer have come to the fore. Your issue around possession, I was hoping this would have been sorted by now because there was a white paper called Tougher Consequences. And what that looked at was an escalating scale of sanction around drug possession. And my comments to it as part of the portfolio was to say 2 things. One is we've got to make certain that those sanctions are appropriate. They were almost exclusively targeting the used words middle class, the middle class cocaine user. They were not taking into account the issue of cannabis or other drugs on our most deprived estates, for example. And the sanction at the time was to take away their passport. Well, some of those kids will never go abroad, you know? Or their driving license, for example. So we basically submitted a load of changes to the Home Office about it, and we were waiting to hear what was happening next. But that was all about possession. That was all about having an escalating scale of a bit like a driver awareness course at one end, moving forward through greater help as you continually repeat offend. We don't know where that is. It's another one of those things which is in the hinterland at the moment. And I've already spoken to the policing minister and said, will we be continuing with the philosophy around from harm to hope and addressing the issues of drugs in our society? And we're looking forward to our next meetings with them. So we'll see where we get to. But yes, absolutely, I haven't given up around that at all.
Thank you, Commissioner. I note and commend the paper. It goes into great detail and offers a decent blueprint of the approach of Dorset Constabulary. I also welcome that this paper does go beyond enforcement and punishment and also focuses on prevention, treatment and recovery. I am shocked but not surprised that Bournemouth is listed in the top 10 major metropolitan centres in terms of crack, heroin and opiate use. Bournemouth in particular has got a severe crack and heroin and opiate crisis. 50 years of the Misuse of Drugs Act has not improved things. We have an entrenched black market dominated by OCGs, and we have criminalisation of addicts, which is doing nothing to take these drugs off the street. In particular, in some of the worst areas in my community, when the alleyways that lead from the dense population centre of a working class community to the local green space and play park are littered with needles. It's not unusual to find people openly injecting heroin. To give a real example, my 8-year-old girl knows what crack cocaine smells like due to the frequency of it being smoked in these alleyways. Now, there is a trial that has been ongoing in Glasgow, which I'm sure you're all aware of, to provide safe spaces for opiate use. Now, it's easy to lean towards thinking this is some kind of soft option to facilitate drugs and almost allow and legalise. However, the choices I see it are people are going to consume these Class A drugs and inject heroin and smoke crack in the local green spaces, the alleyways, the dark parts of our neighbourhood, or this scheme allows for consumption in a safe clinical setting with signposting into treatment and recovery and transition potentially into heroin replacement, as was mentioned earlier. And I wonder if the Commissioner would consider looking at that pilot and offering his opinion whether this is something we could conceivably look at in Dorset and BCP.
I've looked at this issue extensively. No, I do not endorse that approach. And I'll be honest about why I don't endorse that approach. I do believe that there is an element of facilitation around it. But like other PCCs, I also have a morality thing about it, in that we're actually helping people to continue to poison themselves. I have a problem with that. I also have a problem that it's illegal. So we're actually going to say, okay, but it's not that illegal. We're going to allow you to do it. And the third problem is the one which is most fundamental, in that, and it's linked to the fact that I do not see that being successful. And let me explain why. If you look at these around the world, you find that they cost somewhere between 800,000 to £1 million pounds or euros, depending on where you're looking, to run. And if you look at the one which was in Middlesbrough, which was recently closed down, my understanding was that there was 12 people being looked at in that. So I have a real opportunity cost problem with this. If we've got 800 to £1 million, 800,000 to £1 million lying around, I think we would do more good by putting it into proper treatment recovery or enforcement, or indeed the orphan at the feast prevention in the first place. I am not convinced. It is the one red line I have in many ways around this whole thing. And I would commend the panel to look at the effect that that sort of thing has had in Vancouver on East Hastings Street.
I'd just like to thank the PCC for his honest response. I realise from previous discussions on this that this is most likely somewhere where we will agree to disagree going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, I also would like to thank you for the paper. When we wrote the questions or the key lines of inquiry originally, I have to say I didn't expect a paper of quite of this detail and quality. So that is much appreciated. And in most cases, I think it is all very encouraging, and I echo the words of Alistair. I think you would expect me to disagree with your view on cocaine. Sorry, I'll say that again. Disagree with you on your view on cannabis. They could start with a different letter, couldn't they? On cannabis, and I think I would welcome that when we get to if we have the detailed workshop on this, that we perhaps investigate the cause between, the link and cause between that and being a gateway to other drugs. I think that's the question that I think our questioner behind is perhaps alluding to, and I think it would be useful to expose that question a little bit further and look at the evidence in more detail.
Chair, I'm very happy to do that. We'll have an informal training session and we'll be able to debate the questions that we don't have time to debate here, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yes, thank you. The chairman-elect mentioned the Misuse of Drugs Act. I would argue the Misuse of Drugs Act is probably one of the least used pieces of legislation in history. I mean, what I would ask the committee to do is there's a very trendy view on drugs these days that legalization and treatment through things like drug hubs are the way forward. I would ask the committee to look at countries such as Japan who have successfully treated things such as cannabis use through prevention. And sort of get a wider view of it, and there's some very good books out there which I'm happy to recommend. And I'm also open to other arguments as well, and I thank everybody for the civility in this conversation.
Sorry. I'd just like to ask, given that you take a very hard line on people that misuse substances, I wonder where you would draw the line between victim and criminal when it comes to things like county lines, when it comes to people being groomed into drug use.
So I think we have to be a bit careful about where my hard line is. I am very clear in that the stigmatization should be around the act, not the person, if that makes any sort of sense. And Dorset Police, quite rightly, have a view around county lines that a person could be a perpetrator and a victim, and that's the way that they deal with them. It was really interesting. We have I didn't talk about it because of time, but we have a charity called Escape Line, which I brought to Dorset. They're originally in Somerset, and they do a lot of work here with schools. And what they do is talk to parents and they talk to kids about county lines and about the drugs. And one of their speakers is a young man called Reese who was in a county line. And it is horrendous what he talks about. We can talk more about that at the informal meeting. But his point was he wanted the police to be more robust. He felt it would have helped him if they'd been more robust around it. And he says that when he comes and talks and explains why. So, yeah, I'm very clear that we have to get that right. But forgive me, when you have a older individual who has a bootload and he's bought it down here from London and he says I'm coerced, I'm sorry. If he's bought a bootload of cocaine down here from London, I think he should be treated as a criminal. That's different to a kid in county lines.
Yeah, any more questions? A couple from me, if you wouldn't mind. I think the key word that leapt out to me in your paper across all three subjects was availability. What engagement are you having with the new government over availability of the issues that we're talking about?
Well, at this moment, nothing, because they've just started. I don't think it's fair. But if they continue with what we had before, then there will be regular ARCH meetings. So this is the alcohol and homicide meeting that we have. That's with the Home Office. It's also with Public Health. It's also with the police. I would hope that that regularly continues. We're looking at constantly, the portfolio is looking at and being asked to contribute on consultations. One that we've done recently is on drink driving and the level. So it's currently 80. And the BMA have come out making other suggestions, so we've contributed to that. The issue of gambling is the one which is most underdeveloped, in that we, as a portfolio, have tried to engage, but the person responsible for gambling in the government, or the old government at least, was in the culture and media environment. So it's looking at gambling as a leisure pursuit and other matters. The issue of harmful gambling, we have had difficulty engaging. So what we've actually done is started a national task force on harmful gambling. So actually, that's not something we wanted to do, but there wasn't such a thing in existence. So we've just started that, and we're building people onto it. Eventually, I would see that being taken over by government. But as it's not there, we're kind of starting that. Drugs was really well addressed through a joint combating drugs unit in the Home Office. And I'm hoping that continues. We had bi-monthly meetings with the policing minister, but also with the justice minister, the health minister, housing minister. The only minister we couldn't get to the table there was the Secretary of State for Education, or the education minister. And that was what we were working on because of the importance of prevention, etc. I really hope that continues. Let me be blunt, because you've kind of got used to that. If the government does not grip the issue of drugs in our society, then it will fail. And our society will get worse. To me, this is the biggest issue we have, because so much else that we're having to deal with comes from it. So it absolutely needs some focus. And it was getting that through the From Harm to Hope, the Combating Drugs partnerships. I hope that focus continues.
On that point, I'm going to pull stumps on this subject. I think we've all agreed that we would like an informal training day, some sort of training event on this, given by the PCC, which will allow more in-depth questions from the panel and, should we say, more heated debate, possibly, which would be interesting. And I would also recommend to the panel and to the new chair that this paper is placed onto the forward work plan, primarily for the reason the paper is excellent. The paper outlines exactly what you're doing. We could do with more. What effect is it actually having at grassroots level? And that we would be more than happy to do that, maybe in a year, 18 months' time, but that's up to the new chair and the new panel. That would be my idea. Mark, item 9. Sorry, I'm getting myself confused here. Conscious that we're going to get kicked out in a minute.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this fairly brief. So this is in terms of recruitment of the co-opted independent member. So it's your last meeting, Chair, in October. We therefore need to shortly advertise for a further co-opted member. This will be advertised during August with the aim of interviews during September, early October, and then the new co-optee would then take up their role in November ahead of the December meeting.
Thank you. Item 10, complaints update.
Thanks, Chair. So just to confirm, first of all, there are no live complaints against the PCC at this time. We do, however, need to appoint 5 members to the complaints subcommittee. We had a number of volunteers earlier on, which was Councillor Canavan, Dr Mitten, Councillor Wood, Councillor Sidaway and Councillor O'Leary. Could I just have a proposer and a seconder, first of all? So a proposer, Councillor O'Leary, and a seconder, Councillor Bowen. Okay, and just a quick raise of hands to confirm everyone is comfortable with that. Perfect. Thank you, Chair.
Item 11.
And yep, so on to the work plan. We'll have an informal meeting to establish the future work plan for the police and crime panel. We do have a carry forward item, though, from the July 24 meeting for the next meeting, which is right person, right care. So that will be the main focus item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the panel. Does anybody have any further questions, points they'd like to raise before we sort of gallop towards the finish? Right, then item 10, urgent items. There are none. Exempt business, there is none. Thank you for your time today and your team's time and presenting that excellent paper at the end. I apologise again for the hasteness behind it, but we are where we are. Would you like to say something?
Thank you. Yes, only briefly. I'd just like to thank you, Chair, for your hard work over the last X number of years. I think somebody should thank you. I think you've done an exemplary job in making certain I get the intense scrutiny which this job rightly needs. But also, you've been supportive as well. And the panel's been supportive. And that is incredibly, incredibly useful because it shows that we're all working together for the people of Dorset. And the final point I'm going to make is you have made certain, and it's the way this panel needs to be, in that it's been apolitical. And I think that is a real talent to be able to do that. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself and my staff, and also for the way that you've gone about communicating with us in order to get the information so that we can give it to the panel. Thank you.
I would also like to echo the PCC's words. I'm really deeply grateful for your commitment and sense of duty towards your chairship over the year that I have been present on the panel. And I really look forward to the handover periods and learning the art of herding cats as we go forward. But thank you very deeply for all of your commitment over the last 12 years.